but couldn't get the camera, the projector adapted, and by the time he did, the free hour liquor hour was on. He died on the march. We don't know why or how. All the rest of them made it. You take the other 5 pursuit squadrons, they didn't lose any men on the march. Falk says that the most that they could have lost from all causes was 650 men. All the rest of them showed up at O'Donnell.
Oh, I see. You think it's exaggerated?
Well, sure, it's got to be. Now, the Filipinos lost a lot of people.
Right.
But, there couldn't have been more than 700-800 Americans disappeared from all causes. So there's an awful lot of exaggeration.
I'm sure that's...
A lot of people died, but they died in O'Donnell and Cabanatuan.
Did you feel that this O'Donnell, the book you just mentioned, was accurate?
Yes, because he was adjutant, and he kept some records, and it's not complete. He's lacking a lot of information, but he did the best he could. It's the best book on what happened there is by Stanley Falk. It's called I think it's called Bataan, the March of Death.
I have.
March of Death, Bataan.
Oh, yes, I do. I have it in a paperback.
That's it.
Yes, right.
That's the most accurate book. Now he's the one that comes up with the 650 figures.
Yes, he's more conservative on that.
I'm in the minority.
What's your full name?
Teresa Smith.
Teresa Smith. And sir, what's your full name?
Thomas Edward Gage, Jr.
Okay, this is June 12th, 1987. This is Joe Todd and Teresa Smith, an interview with Thomas Edward Gage, Jr. in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Sir, what's your address here?
4168 East 46th Place.
46th Place. Where were you born?
Little Rock, Arkansas.
And when's your birthday?
July 24th. I'll be 72.
And you were born in what year?
1915.
1950. Who was your father?
Thomas Edward Gage.
And your mother?
Margaret Shaw.
Is that her maiden name?
That was her maiden name.
Shaw. S-H-A-W?
S-H-A-W. She was born in Augusta, Georgia, and my dad was born near Ozark, Arkansas. Raised over at Tecumseh.
Did you know your grandparents?
I didn't know my paternal grandfather.
Were any of your ancestors in the Civil War that you know of?
They came from Tennessee. Could have been. I don't know that they were. Okay. My grandmother was here but when this was Indian Territory.
She came to Indian Territory around what time?
Well, a little before 1900. So this is late in 1907, wasn't it?
Right.
Before 1900. My dad was born in 1897, I think. And,
what was your grandmother's name?
Hunter. Now my father's mother?
But the one that came to Indian Territory.
Nancy Hunter.
Nancy Hunter.
I've got the family tree there if you want to see it. I just happened to find out today for some reason and put it in that drawer there. I just found out that she's probably part Cherokee.
Yeah.
I can't stop that.
We can't stop that.
Let it go.
Okay.
You stop your film?
Yeah. Oh.
What's going to do?
Did your grandmother talk about the trip to Indian Territory?
Not to me, but I think she talked to my oldest, the sister next in line, which is the oldest of my 2 sisters.
Why did the family come to Indian Territory?
I really don't know. I think her husband was a bartender, but I'm not sure, and he was killed some way by a horse. My father is the youngest of about 7 or 8 children, and I think I saw all of them, my aunts and uncles, at one time or another. My grandmother lived with us quite a bit when I was young, and she'd go live with somebody else, and somebody else didn't come back.
And when did, if you were born in Little Rock, when did you move to Oklahoma?
Well, like I say, it might have been 1917 or 16, I'm not sure. I have some pictures of me supposedly taken in Little Rock when I was a couple of years old. But I do remember living here when I was about 4.
And that's in Tulsa.
Yeah, I lived over on the west side there, the other side of Elgin, somewhere over there. Pipe yard, lived in a garage apartment upstairs, right next to a pipe yard. Then my mother and dad bought a house out in the peach orchards at 2627 East 7th Street, half a block from Kendall School. I can remember real. My maternal grandfather came and built a house for us. Then he came back and made a larger house out of it.
What are your childhood memories of Tulsa? What did the city look like in those years?
One of the earliest memories is when they burnt the north town out. You know the race
I was
riot?
going to ask about the race riots.
My father took me over to Standpipe Hill, which is on North Cincinnati, and I must have been, when was that,
1921.
Well, see, I was 6 years old. And we went up on the hill there, and I could look down into the old town down there, and the rows of these little shanties with the backyards, and the houses was burning. And I remember one, there was a big old sow running around in this fenced-in enclosure, and the house was burning, and this sow was squealing. I've never forgotten that. And then I lived right near the corner of 7th and Columbia, where Kendall School is on one corner, and a Jen's grocery store on another, and Cal Arnold's drugstore on another, and a church on the other. I went to school there, I guess, the kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade.
Let me back up. Did you ever hear what caused that race riot?
It was supposedly that a white woman had been raped by 1 or 2 young men, and we had to hear, a bunch of young people who were left over from the war, not much to do, and I think they're the ones that instigated it. But that was the supposed rumor that it's supposed to have been in an elevator in downtown. Now, I didn't see any more. Dad just took me down there. I didn't see him loading them into the boxcars at McNulty Park and all that, but I know for years you would never see a black person south of 1st Street. And there's a few worked in the stores downtown, but you hardly ever saw any blacks anywhere over south of that line.
And where did you start school?
It'd be 1920.
1920.
I'll be 5 years old now.
And what was the name of the school?
Kendall.
Kendall.
Kendall Elementary. It's still there. And out on the hill just on past it was called Kendall College. The old original.
It's now University of Tulsa.
Yeah, the old original bell tower building's still there. That was all that was there, the building that has the bell tower in it. And the streetcar ran out 7th Street on a high dirt bank, and 7th Street was dirt. And the trolley would go along on that high bank, and it would go up to Kendall College, and it would stop, and the conductor would take the trolley line off and run the trolley around back and hook it on the back, and then the back of the trolley became the front. And us kids used to sneak rides on that cow catcher, and you switch that for him, and he'd give you a penny sometimes.
What was your first teacher's name?
I haven't the foggiest idea. I remember going to school. Now, one vivid memory, I went to kindergarten in the morning, and in our front yard, my dad and mother had built a sandbox, and it planted a little old whip for cottonwood, about 3 feet tall. And I was playing in that sandbox one morning, and my kindergarten teacher had her afternoon class for a walk, and they went by the house. Now, I remember that. There I was sitting in the sandbox and watched these kids go by.
In the 1920s, of course, you were, 10, 11, 12 years old. Were there many of the girls they called the flappers around Tulsa?
I don't think it quite got started yet. I remember a little later we had moved, and I lived on well, I guess we hadn't. Yeah, we'd moved. I lived on 11th Street, and had watermelon places, where they kept the watermelons in the big boxes of ice water, and then the tables, and then you could go out on East Admiral, and they had barbecue places, and the colored people would play and sing, and it was getting flapperish then. The short dresses and the hats that came down like cold shuttles over the ears.
About what year was that?
Oh, that had to be in mid-20s.
Mid-20s. You know, I forgot to ask.
Or later.
What type of work your father did?
When he first came to Tulsa, he was a cigar salesman. He met my mother in working for Frug's department store in Little Rock, and he was a salesman, and she worked in the cashier's department. And they got married and came here, and Mr. Frug gave him a bedroom suit, you know, chest made out of white bird's eye maple. And she kept that all the time that she was alive. She kept that. But anyway, they came here, and I don't know what they did when they first came here, but he sold cigars and cigarettes and chewing tobacco, and he traveled around in a Model T, and he went to all the little towns around here, Jinx, Bixby, Owasso, and peddled this stuff. And punch boards, you know, punch boards where you punch out a number and you win a prize. And he worked for a company, and the name of the cigar was the name of a U.S. senator. And he pulled some shenanigans, and the company went bankrupt. And my mother never got over hating the senator. I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, he lost his job, and he sold shoes down on 2nd Street in one of the stores down there. Then later he went to work in what we used to have a lot of, loan offices. You know, where you could go in and you could borrow $25 or $30, and you come back in a week and you pay 50-cent carrying charge, and you come back next week and 50-cent carrying charge, and you might do that for 20 years and still be paying on the original loan, you know. But the collateral for the loans was furniture and cars and things like that. But he worked in a loan office until he retired.
What year did you graduate from high school?
My wife and I both graduated. We're class of 33.
1933.
Bottom of the Depression.
I was going to ask, what was it like to be in school in the Depression?
No problem. We were lower middle class, I guess. We always had a place to live. Dad always had a car. We had some food. He got real tight, but we managed. And Depression didn't mean anything to me. I have 2 sisters. One was about 4 years younger than me, and another about 7, I guess. And we always had we had a lot of potato soup, I remember. And Dad would bring something home from work to cook for me. So Mother never knew what supper was going to be until he came home from work. But we never lacked. We never had a whole lot, but we never lacked.
What'd you do after high school?
Well, I never graduated. I went through this pomp and circumstances for the National Honor Society, and that was it. It was hot down there, you know, real hot, no air conditioning, and tie and shirt. So I did that, and I left. I went up to Camp Garland, Boy Scout camp, and worked as a counselor. Went up a couple weeks early, and we put in a bridge, rock bridge. And I came back, and the next fall, I took postgraduate work. I went in and took 3 or 4 courses. I mean, something to do with mechanical drawing for one thing, and physics was another, I think. Anyway, I took 2 or 3 courses I wasn't able to take when I was... See, in those days, you took 2 things. You either took a commercial course, knowing you were never going to go to college, and you took shorthand, typing, bookkeeping, stuff like that, or you took college preparatory, Latin and geometry and trig. Well, I went the commercial route, so when couldn't get a job and work, so I just thought, well, a couple more, a whole semester, 2 semesters, postgraduate. Didn't cost anything. Then I worked at the 2 buildings there in Tulsa, the Phil Tower, owned by the Wade Phillips, and across the street was the Philcade. They had 6 elevators, and they were the kind, they rode as elevators, and you had a handle that made them go up and go down, and when you got to the floor, you had to hit the floor. You had to stop it so the thing would float up and level. And you weren't permitted to miss a floor more than 2 inches. And you pulled a great big old sliding brass rod door, and then you pull the door. Well, I was an extra boy. if one of the regulars wanted off, well, they'd call me and I'd go down, put a uniform on, and work an hour or a day or several days. I did that for quite a while. Then I got somebody, a lady that got you jobs for a fee, and she got me a job with an outfit called Marion Machinery Found Supply Company over on North Elgin, I believe. And they made, you ever see a band wheel power that pumps 5 or 6 wells at once? Looks like a big bicycle wheel.
Oh, that the old shackle rod?
Yeah, and well, they invented that, and they were still selling the repair parts for that. And they also made these jacks.
You familiar with them?
No,
Teresa?
no.
It's, well, describe the old shackle rod.
Well, what it is, there's a single cylinder gas engine with a big flywheel, and it was hooked up with a big leather belt that went to what was a bicycle wheel. Looked like a bicycle wheel, but it'd be as big as round as this room. And they had an iron disc like this that was on the bottom of the axle of this wheel, but there was a pin right here, and as it went around, that would be off center, and they would hook iron rods into that. They could hook up to as many as 12 maybe, depending on the depth of the well. And when this thing went around, well, that would make these rods go like this. Well, out at the well was a pump, that, you know, a pumping jack. As this thing pumped, now what they had in the oil field in those days, they had pumpers, people who lived there, and they would handle 1 or 2 of these, and that was their duty to run these things and shut them down if necessary and start them up. If they got too much of a load, they'd take 2 or 3 of these rods off and still pump 2 or 3 wells. Now it's developed up now where each one of these pumping jacks got its own engine, probably electric or gas.
I remember those shackle rods would stretch for...
Pull rods, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they could go a long, long way. They were screwed together and they were held up a little iron post with a piece of wooden block that had a notch in it, and it rest them. And where the pump was going, sometimes off over here, instead of having a well, they had a big box full of rock that was a counterweight that would keep that wheel balanced. They had to have so many on there or it would get out of balance. Well, Marion Machine sold these parts for these things. They invented that, and they stayed with it about 30 years too long. Well, I worked there about 3 or 4 years, and they finally, now they ran over in Oklahoma City, they ran 3 machines they called pipe pulley machines, where they pull pipe out of the well. You remember those wells over there about 6,000 feet deep? And when they went down, they pull that pipe out and unscrew it and lay it down, and it was practically like brand new pipe. And we got so much a foot and so much a day. I kept the payroll on these. But anyway, they finally went out of business here in Tulsa. And I worked for Natkin Company. That's a big outfit here now. They are air conditioned outfit. I worked in the office for about 6 months.
And what period?
Oh, this would have to be about 1939, early 40. And 2 of my friends couldn't get in the cadet training because they weren't college graduates, so they settled to be enlisted in the regular Army for the Air Corps at San Antonio, Brooksfield, and they were going to be airplane mechanics. And after they'd been gone about a week, I went with my mother downtown to the post office, and while she was doing some business, I went upstairs to see the recruiting people to see if I'd be drafted, because I was wearing glasses. And the old sergeant said, "Sure, they'll get you. Why don't you enlist?" So I did, and I got there with them. I stayed with them well, I never did get with them, because when I come in, they pulled me out and put me into a pursuit squadron. They were out in the field as boots, you know, trainees. They put me in a barracks, and after about 2 months, I went to Hamilton Field in California. These 2 guys went on through their training, and they went down to some town in Texas, and they never left the States. They stayed there the whole, come home about once a month.
Now, when did you take your basic training?
I enlisted, the emergency was declared the 16th of September, 1940. I enlisted the 20th of September, 1940, here. Sent to Brooksfield. About the 3rd day, they put us out to do close order drill. All we had was a fatigue cap and coveralls, no shoes. You know, we had our civilian shoes. My little toes got infected, and they pulled my toenails out. So I missed my basic training. I was on sick call for the whole thing. I did about 1 week's KP is about all I did. And then I went to California, and we never did get basic training there.
How did you travel from Brooks to California?
On train.
Tell me about the trip train. What?
Okay, in the squadron the 34th pursuit was an interceptor pursuit. We had one officer. I don't remember his name, but he was called Little Joe. He was a West Point graduate. He got in trouble for flying his plane through the balloon hangar there at Brooks Field. But anyway, we only had the one officer, and the big thing I did was hiding from the first sergeant. His name was Lester Hodges. He was first sergeant. You hide from him because he puts you on a detail, KP or cleaning up, policing the or something, and you can't go back in the barracks till 4 o'clock. Well, anyway, and then me being on sick call, I really want to keep out of his sight. Anyway, they sent us about 1st of October 1940. They sent Lester Hodges and 163 men to Hamilton Field on a troop train, no officer. And all I remember is riding the train. It was a regular Pullman coach, is all I can remember.
So you had a
couple of days, and when I woke up in California, I looked out the window and there was a gray wall. And it was a stucco white wall. It was a warehouse, and they'd pulled a train in on the side in Hamilton. You got off the train, it was fog everywhere. And they moved us down to the far end of Hamilton where they had these wooden barracks. Now Hamilton had 3-story and 4-story permanent barracks, brick, stucco, that had and hangars, but it also had a lot of these army barracks. You know how they are. They're 2-story, big long hall, lots of windows and latrines, washrooms on one end, and a couple of rooms for non-commissioned officers. Well, that's where we were assigned there.
What type of meals do you have on the train?
I don't remember. And that's a funny thing. All through this thing, I cannot give you details about what I ate on that train. I can give you a very sketchy description of the food on the Coolidge, the transport we went on. The Japanese ship that took me to Japan, I don't remember too much about. Now, the mess there in the prison camp, I can remember very vividly. But the eating, it's one of those things, you know you did it, but it's something that's automatic, so you don't remember.
What about the sleeping quarters on the train?
I think we slept in Pullman bunks. It was a rowdy bunch. We were all rookies mostly, and a few of the old hands, been in the Army for years. And Lester Hodges, the first sergeant, still in charge of us. And when we got to Hamilton, why, we were come under a commanding officer named Clinton D. Vincent, Casey Vincent, West Point man. Died here about 15 years ago of overwork, youngest general in the Air Force. But he didn't go with us. He stayed at Hamilton when we left.
What'd you do at Hamilton?
Hide from the first sergeant. And it rained, and there's nothing to do. But they came after about a week, 10 days of that, they came down and they wanted 3 men that could type. Well, you don't ever volunteer because the typing might be mean a wheelbarrow. But I was so bored that I volunteered, and 2 others. They sent those 2 others up to the line, the operations, where they work on the plane. They sent me to the first sergeant, Mr. Hodges. Well, he wanted to clerk, and he put me to work probably typing a roster or orders or something, and I did that kind of work for 3 years for Mary Machine. I was a secretary. I took shorthand and wrote letters and kept books, payroll books. So this was a snap. All this stuff in the orderly room was just easy. So it wasn't very long. I don't remember dates, but I had to go on KP. They pull them in off the roster, the privates, and they're supposed to take them in order, and no exception. So when it got up to me to be KP, I went. But I'd only been with her 15 minutes, and one of the men came over and says, "Gage, you can't do KP. You're a corporal." The first sergeant wanted me to be a corporal because he didn't get in that orderly room. In the meantime, I had done so much work that he had a staff sergeant in there, and he pushed him on up the line and let me take over as chief clerk in the orderly room. And it wasn't more than a short time after that I was a buck sergeant, and I stayed a buck sergeant till we shipped out in November of 1941. But in the meantime, there were some more changes. Captain Vincent and Hodges got promoted to group, and Lieutenant Merritt, who had come up from the ranks, he was a second lieutenant, was the new commanding officer, and the carpenter, the squadron carpenter, became the first sergeant. Well, he knew for nothing, so it was up to me to run the orderly room. But then we went on a maneuver a short maneuver, and the two staff sergeants in charge of the squadron supply did such a poor job of getting the tents and the field ranges and all that stuff back into the supply room. They were over 2 weeks getting it back in there, and it got rained on. And Lieutenant Merritt blew his top, and he shanghaied them out. He sent them somewhere else. And I don't know how it happened, but Pop Randall says, Gage, you're going to be the new supply sergeant. Now, they were two staffs running it, and now I'm a buck sergeant. And they put me in there with a couple of clerks. Well, we went on another maneuver in about less than a month, and when it come back, one of the boys that I got to help me had been in Schofield Barracks Infantry in Hawaii. He come back to San Francisco, re-enlisted. They didn't send him back. They sent him to an Air Force outfit as a private. He'd been up and down. He'd been busted. He'd been in the Army quite a while. He's a fairly young fellow, about my age, I guess. Well, I got him for a clerk, and he knew how to, and he ran that supply room. I was in charge of it. Well, what we did when we come off of maneuvers, he said, Gage, get us about 30 men. We need a detail there, and I got it. And as those trucks come in, those 30 men would grab that stuff and take it in the supply room. Well, when the last truck drove away, everything was back where it belonged, which pleased Lieutenant Merritt no end. But anyway.
What unit were you in?
I was in the 34th Pursuit Squadron, Interceptor, 35th Pursuit Group, 4 squadrons. The 34th, the 21st, Headquarters, and the 70th. And our main job was we were getting these young fellows out of the flying schools, Marchfield and Randolph, and they came to us, and we had some P-40s. And this is the first time they'd ever been in a warplane. They'd been in, in trainers. And the deal was to keep these things flying and get them in the air where they could get a little time in this warplane. And that's basically what the whole group was doing. But the 70th never did amount to much, and Headquarters was administrative. So the 21st and 34th were the 2 active squadrons. And when we come off that second maneuver, they called us back early, and I was told to take I had a shipping list of everything we needed, shovels, hoes, rakes, brooms, mops, whatever. And I was told to go around the base there, and if we found anything on that list that we didn't have, if somebody else had it, we got it. All we had to do was take it. Well, what we found out was we was going overseas. And nobody knew where we were going. But anyway, around the last of October, they moved us down to Angel Island, which is in San Francisco Harbor. There was a big island, and they had a big mess hall on there, and they could barrack, and they could hold a lot of troops. And we were there. Now, they wouldn't let anyone off that island who was shipping, but I managed to wrangle a pass for myself and my infantryman. His name was Arthur Campbell. And he had a girl who worked on the paper. And we got ashore, and I knew he probably wanted to see his girl, so I said, won't you take me down, I don't remember the main street there, Market Street, and let me off, and I'll go see a show, and in a couple hours you come back and get me. And then we had to be back before midnight. Well, they did that, and I went to see Gary Cooper and Sergeant York. Now, I had a deal with Virginia that I would call her, and I would call collect. And if she wasn't home, well, they'd refuse the call. So we were engaged. So I called. This is Halloween night, see, 31st of October. And Dan Gummit, her sister, answered the phone and accepted the collect charge. And she had gone with a bunch of girls for a lark downtown, and they went to one of the burlesque shows out on North Main Street, for a lark. So I didn't get to talk to her. We sailed the next morning on the USS Coolidge, which was a United States steamship, which was something like a love boat now, you know what I mean? It was a cruise ship. And it had been commandeered by the government, and I think it made maybe 1 or 2 trips to the Pacific carrying troops. But they put us on that. Oh, I wanted to say though, when Campbell picked me up, he says, Gage, let's go AWOL. He says, let's hide out my girls for a week or 2 till that ship sails, and we don't have to go. Then they'll put us in the stockade, and then we'll get sent somewhere else. Now, he did that, see? And he was still, I think he was still private first class. Well, he'd been up and down, but me, I'd worked my way up to sergeant, and being kind of conscientious and law-abiding, I said, no, we better not. I've often wondered what would happen. Probably be dead. We'd probably gone to England and Africa and never made it home. But anyway, we went, and we went on into the Philippines. But we got on it. Now, the way it was, if you were a staff sergeant or tech sergeant, they put you down in the staterooms, and they were bad because they were those hot and those shit. But all the corporals, sergeants, corporals, and privates, they had all the way around the front of the half ship, they had an outside promenade, and they had an inside promenade, which was glassed in. Well, in that inside promenade, they had put these bunks up. They were on pipe frames, and they were 4 high, double, see, and mine was just where the work started to curve like this, and I got the top bunk, and you could lay there and look right straight out. See, it was just luxury. Out in the air, you didn't get down there all that. So it was a good bunk. We had one boy, Gerganis, a cook, that rolled into his bunk when we went in on board there November the 1st, and he never got out of his bunk till we got to Manila. He was even seasick when it was anchored at the dock. We had to feed him all the way over there. He was sick the whole time, or he thought he was sick.
Did you get seasick?
No. I enjoyed the trip, and
What did you do on the boat for recreation? What do you do?
Not a whole lot. They had some movies, and you could go out and run around the promenade. Some of the guys tried to wash their clothes by tying them on ropes and tying them behind, but they pulled the ropes up and there weren't any clothes there. They were gone. Some of them thought they were shark fishing, but nobody ever caught a shark. And you go in and you go through a steam line. Everything was steam cooked. Now, you talk about food, it was steam cooked. And you get a tray and get your food. Now, the officers had their mess, the officers' mess, and they could order. But we just got whatever. There was a variety, but it was all steamed, as I remember.
What kind of food did you have?
Well, it was steam cooked. It'd be cabbage and corned beef and potatoes and anything that you could cook and put in a steam tray on, like they have in the cafeteria. It was a pretty good variety. But I got tired of the steam cooking. That's what bothered me. I always weighed about 125 pounds. I got out of high school, and when I was in the Army, I never gained a whole lot of weight. And we stopped in Honolulu one day, and everybody was allowed off. And we had to be back by, I think, 6 o'clock. Now, I don't know, some of them got on tour, some of them went into Honolulu. I and a friend of mine who lived in Claremore, a boy named Truman Ziegler, who, when the carpenter was promoted to first sergeant, he became the squadron carpenter and photographer. For some reason or another, he and I got together there in Honolulu, and we went out to Waikiki Beach and went to the zoo. And we spent the whole day there, more or less. We went down to the Hawaiian hotel, whatever, I think it was that hotel that they have there at Waikiki. Didn't go in, we just saw it. And we went through the zoo. And on the way back, come off that boat there at the pier there in Honolulu, and come off, and the first thing you see is a huge Safeway store there in Hawaii. Well, I didn't pay attention, but on the way back, I went in and I bought a whole lot of candy bars and various cookies, and I got a whole big sack of lemon drops because someone said those were good for seasickness, and I thought Gerganis might use some lemon drops. And we were escorted by the cruiser Indianapolis. And on the way on, from then on into Manila, every once in a while she'd take a wild ash off to see something and come back. Later on, after I come home, the Indianapolis disappeared mysteriously. And they said she was carrying atomic bomb parts and disappeared. But I've learned since then that there were some survivors. But it was a long haul, watch the flying fish, and read and try to see one of those movies. I remember when we come into Manila Harbor, I went down to see a movie for some reason, and it was the Marx Brothers in one of their pictures. And then I come out, and this steamship is going along the coast of Bataan, and the big old trees hang over with the moss on them, and this barely missing our whatever those masts are, the masts and funnels, But here we are coasting along right almost on the shore. You could almost touch it. Because evidently the channel between Corregidor and Bataan went real close to Bataan, and then you went back and you had to follow a marked channel into Manila. And I don't remember I remember unloading, but they took us to Nichols Field, I guess, in trucks.
What was your first impression of Manila?
Well, the odor. The heat and the odor. The smell. And that's kind of funny because years later I worked for Laughlin Brothers Drilling Company, and I went to Maracaibo, and we got off the plane, and the first thing I hit was that same heat and odor, same smell. Manila was a wall city, and Maracaibo was a wall city. Very much alike. But we were put at Nichols Field and put in these temporary barracks that they were building, and we were under quarantine. We weren't supposed to leave the field, and we was about a week. But when we unloaded at the dock, the mess sergeant got his field ranges set up and cooked sauerkraut and wieners. He said he apologized. It was Franklin D's Thanksgiving Day. And I say that, and people say, what do you mean Franklin D? Well, he set Thanksgiving up a week early to make more shopping days, to help the Depression out and get business going. So Thanksgiving was advanced a week. And he apologized. All he had was wiener and sauerkraut. And then we moved the next Thursday to Del Carmen, our airfield, which was near Clarkfield. And he had sauerkraut and wieners again. He said, I'm sorry I couldn't get turkey, he said. We're moving. So 2 Thanksgiving days, we missed our Thanksgiving dinner. But we moved at night out of, I want to tell you one thing that I do remember. One night there, we were blacked out on the Coolidge. And the reason was they said we were going past Truck, I think, which was a Japanese strong point. And when we moved out of Nichols Field, we went in trucks with blackout lights. And when we got to Del Carmen, it was right in the cane fields. They had the engineers, the 803 engineers, had put a tent city up on a little hill. And they were down in the cane field. Their stuff was all scattered around, looked like a hobo camp. They had bulldozers and trucks. And they were bulldozing 1 mile of that strip of that cane into about a 100-foot wide strip for a runway. And we thought, well, we didn't know. Anyway, we were there. We didn't have any airplanes. And I had a orderly, they had these pyramidal tents, just rows of them. And I had I slept in one tent with some guys, and I had another tent over in the other row that was my orderly room. I had a typewriter on the desk and a field safe. That's about all I had. File cabinet.
What was your impression of the Japanese at this time?
I never even thought about Japanese. None of us did. We weren't reading the papers too much, and we were young fellows. We were all, I'm about 5 years older than the majority of them. I was 25, and they were 18 to 20. And what happened is when we got into Hamilton, they took the men that came from Brooks and took a bunch of them here and here to start new squadrons. We got down to one time, there's only about 60 of us, and we were all buck sergeants. And they keep bringing new people in. And, well, just before we sailed, we had 210 men. They brought over 100 brand new men in that never seen anybody, and they threw them in with 100 or so of us that had only seen each other for a short time, put us on the ship, so nobody hardly knew. I'd say that there was a yearbook. I have a yearbook here that was published in June of '42, and it's got about 80 or 90 pictures in it, and that was the Corps, the older Corps, and all of those weren't the ones that come from Brooke. Some of them were. This was the whole problem. General Arnold came to Hamilton and talked to the non-commissioned officers, and he said, I'm here to tell you that we don't have any airplanes right now, but we're making them, and we're going to get them. And you're going to have lots of airplanes soon. And what I want you non-commissioned officers to do, these are sergeants and corporals, is to keep training these men and getting them ready when we get these planes. Well, I remember that speech. Well, when we got the Philippines, we were supposed to have P-40s. We didn't have anything. The 21st Pursuit stayed at Nichols Field, and we went to Del Carmen. They got 18 brand new P-40Es, and they were still putting them together when the war started. They gave us 15 P-35As that had been built for Sweden, and they looked just like a Japanese Zero. And Sweden, normally they had 230 caliber machine guns on the cow, but Sweden had asked for a 50 to be put in each wing. Well, when they come out of the factory, the Army commandeered them, and they sent about 30 of them to the Philippines, and they flew the engines out of them. They were practically junk, but we got 15 of them, and that's what we had. Now, when the war started, we had these 15 P-35s. We had 12 30 caliber Springfield rifles, and 6 Lewis guns that came out of the back cockpits of World War I airplanes.
Is water-cooled or air-cooled?
No, they're air-cooled. The drum on there, but these didn't have any sights, and they didn't have any tracer in their drum, solid bullets. And we had 6 of them, and we had about 24 drums of ammunition. But what they did, they dug a hole a little bigger diameter to this, down about 6 feet, put an iron rod in the center, and right at the ground level, they put that 30 caliber Lewis gun on a swivel. 6 of them. That was what we were going to defend this aerodrome with. I found out later that this airfield was being built for A-26 bombers. That's a three-place bomber. There were 2 squadrons. There was one group of 4 squadrons on the Coolidge with us, and there was a National Guard tank outfit on the Coolidge with us. The A-26 people never got any airplanes. They never did. But at Del Carmen, there were 500-pound bombs scattered all through the brush where we were. And they weren't for P-40s because they can't carry them. I figured I thought we were at a B-17 field, but found out later it was an A-26.
Now what is an A-26?
A-26 was a light bomber, type dive bomber that had 3 seats in the cockpit.
How does it compare to B-17?
Oh Lordy, it was hardly just a little larger than a pursuit ship.
Okay.
It didn't B-10 or B-18 or B-17. No, it was a very small. It could only carry just a few bombs. Not in a bomb bay, but attached to clamps under the wings.
Now, when did you arrive in Manila?
20th of November. 20th of November, we went to Nichols Field. The 27th, we moved out at night in the trucks and went to Del Carmen. Now, what do you want? You want some more?
Yes, sir.
I'm just getting to where we up before the war started.
Did you have any idea the Japanese were going to attack?
Yeah. Oh, I was wondering why we went blackout past truck. You know, that could cause a little, well, I wonder what the score is. And then we were blackout at night in nose. But Lord, I wasn't even thinking about a war. I didn't know all this stuff was going on. We didn't have television, and the radio didn't play it too much, and I never read the newspaper much in those days. I don't think anybody in the squadron had any idea that we were going to get in a war with the Japanese.
So what did you do there up until December 7th or December 8th?
Okay, well now Del Carmen, I'm orderly room, and I'm getting ready to make the November 30th payroll. See, we got paid back there in October in the States, which is before we sailed, and we're going to pay November the 30th or December 1st. We're going to pay these men. I got 210 men in my squadron and 8 enlisted medics. I did not pay the 20 officers. They got their money some other way, and I'm more or less. And I've got other paperwork going on, you know. There's quite a bit of paperwork that goes through an orderly room, and I'm making sure I'm keeping up to date on the day book and all that stuff. Like I say, we got a carpenter for a first sergeant, and he's not too much on that kind of thing. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the big thing, I told you they put me in the supply. And on the way, when we got on the ship, well, we heard the rumor that when we left, that the Lieutenant Merritt had turned the squadron at Hamilton over to another officer, and that's the barracks and the beds and the mess hall and all that. And the rumor said that we was way short. Well, Lieutenant Merritt could have been short when he signed for it, because I don't think he ever inventoried. But he was way short, and they said he's going to be court-martialed because there's several $1,000s shortage. And Campbell came to me and he says, Gage, he says, let's throw all our records overboard. I said, well, it won't help the lieutenant because what we have isn't what's short. It's that stuff back there in the States, and we didn't keep those records. But anyway, he never got court-martialed. But I'm doing my orderly room work, and the guys are trying to get a line set up down here under the trees, you know, and they got these P-30, about the 4th, we don't do much of anything from the 27th to the 4th of December except settle in on this camp, you know, and try to get a routine and who's going to do what and what the details are. The radio people are having to set up their communications. I know they went a room about the size of this. They hired some Filipinos to dig down about 4 feet, just dig out a cellar at the side. And then they put some posts up, and they put Swally and Nipa on it, you know, made a little house. But Swally and Nipa. That's the Swally is the woven bamboo that makes the sides, and the Nipa is the leaves that they make the roof with. Okay. And the bamboo shack. Anyway, they had this, and they could windows where they could see out in the openings. But what they were thinking about, if anything happened, they could get down below the level of the ground. They might have a little protection. Same reason they dug these holes, you know, about 6 feet deep, and mounted these guns in them. But that's about all. The line was trying to. We didn't have any airplanes, but I guess they knew they were going to get something, expecting to get P-40s, I guess, because we heard the 21st was gotten some. And then the 21st was flying these P-35s at Nichols, and they started bringing them in. Well, they had to work on those and make sure the guns would fire and the engines would run. that's something I never got into. That's the line, see, and I was more or less with the personnel. But anyway, about the 5th of December, Lieutenant Merritt called the entire squadron together and said, now men, he said, here it is. Over on Formosa, there's several hundred Japanese bombers. And I think they're going to come here. Now, that's the first time we ever heard anything. And he said, what we're going to do, one of these nights I'm going to have a surprise drill. And when you hear my whistle, why that means that's an alert, and we're going into a war status, and the crews are going to get these airplanes fired up and running, and everybody do whatever they're supposed to do. Well, that same night, about 10 o'clock, he blew his whistle, and I could see one revetment where they had a P-35, and they did get it fired up, and it ran for a minute or two, and then they shut it down. And that's all. I mean, I never did it. Now, we had this city, I said, about 4 or 5 streets, and over here was a big mess tent that was a mess hall, and they had to cook outdoor field ranges they cooked on, and we ate inside this screened-in tent thing. It was a mess with tables, you know. Well, one day there, it would have been the 8th of December, now. One of the cooks come down, little Shorty Batson, he lives down here in Madisonville, and said, Gage, we just heard that over the radio from Manila that Pearl Harbor was bombed. And he turned around and went back. Now, I've asked him about it, he doesn't remember telling me that. But just about that time, his rumbling started, like thunder. And I stepped out to look, and I looked over toward, now Clark was about 15 kilometers from us, about 6, 7 miles. I looked over towards Clark, and the air was just full of, you read my piece in the paper, was full of what I thought were airplanes, little black dots, and there were hundreds of them, hundreds. I thought, my God, that's a lot of airplanes. And then I realized that what it was, that little rumbling was anti-aircraft, and those little black spots was anti-aircraft bursts over Clark. And you could see, if you look real close, you could see little tiny points that were the bombers. And that's, I hot-footed over to our adjutant, who was the first lieutenant, who got sick and went to the hospital there in Hamilton. He wasn't going to go with us, and I heard the Lieutenant Merritt tell a couple officers to go get that SOB and be sure he's on that ship. He says he's not going to go break it. But anyway, he affected an English air, you know, and he carried a swagger stick and jodhpurs, and you'd think if he had a monocle, I believe he'd wore one. But I went over and told him that Clark Field's being bombed, and he said, Sergeant, he said, is that official? I said, hell no, Lieutenant, look, out the back of your tent. But I don't remember any more that day. Now, I didn't think our pilots flew, but I've been told that I just went to a convention here about 3 weeks ago, and I was told by one of the pilots that Lieutenant Merritt put some planes up that day, but he never got any orders. And the next day he put a few planes up, and he never got any orders. The 8th and the 9th, we never got any orders. And on the 10th, we did get some orders. Now, people are in different places. We had, the mess sergeant was at Clark Field drawing supplies, and some of our medics were there, and everybody you talk to's got a different story about what happened this day. So, and they're all different, according to what they saw. But on the 10th, they got orders to send planes up to Aperi, which is up in northern Luzon. The Japanese were landing. So Lieutenant Merritt got 2 flights organized to go up there. And when they were taking off, they got a radio orders not to go there, go to Vigan, which was around to the west a little bit more, another place where they were landing. Well, I didn't think they got very many planes up, but one of the lieutenants at the convention says he thinks they actually got 9 in the air, 2 flights. Lieutenant Merritt had a flight, and Lieutenant Ben Brown had a flight. And Lieutenant Crosland, who was at the convention, was in the Lieutenant Merritt's right wingman on the right. And he said when after they got, to get off the ground there, it'd take about 10 minutes to get the plane up because the dust was about this deep where they had bulldozed. And when one plane went out, they had to wait 10, 15 minutes if the wind wasn't blowing for this to settle for another one. So it took quite a while to get these guys in the air. But when they got up, started out, Shorty Crosland told me that when they were going up, and he says right over on his right here was a Japanese 2-seater going down. And of course they couldn't do anything about it, they just went on up. I don't know. But anyway, another time there, a Japanese fighter landed on our field and sat there and looked around a little bit and finally decided he wasn't on a home base and took off. Now the P-35s and the Zeros look almost alike just to look at them, you know, the outlines of them. But anyway, these two flights went on up to Vigan, and when they got there, they were up pretty high, and Lieutenant Merritt says, there they are, he says, let's go. And they just went down, and there was a big transport unloading, boats between the transport and the beach, and there were several smaller transports unloading. And there's only one small little ship there that could have been a corvette, or like the Snark, or it could have been a small destroyer, Japanese. But the articles these guys writing these stories say there were 3 or 4 cruisers and half a dozen destroyers in there when this going on. Well, they wasn't. But anyway, Lieutenant Merritt went down on the big transport, and Shorty's going right with him to the right, and he's firing 50s on that transport. And just as he gets over the transport, something blows up, and Lieutenant Merritt just rolls right over into the ocean. Shorty pulled up, went up in a high climb, and he said while he was climbing, anti-aircraft started breaking around him, and he looked over, and it was that Corvette shooting at him. He just tipped over and come back down, and he said fired his 50s, come back across the transport, fired up 50s at it, and between him and the shore were these landing boats, and he just fired all he could at those. And when he pulled up on the beach, he decided he better go home because his ammo was about gone, and so was his gas. He took off, and he said there was a P-35 ahead of him, and he tried to catch it, but every time he'd speed up too. So, but they all come home. Now I don't know how many went, but they all come home that day.
What about Merritt?
Merritt, he's dead.
Yeah.
He's in the ocean. But he's the only one that didn't come in. And they land, and right away the crews start working on these to fuel them, and put more ammo in them. And these guys go try to get something to eat. See, they've been gone all morning, and they're hungry. And in fact, I found out that Lieutenant Nichols never got out of his plane. When they come in, there was about 6 or 7 planes off in the distance there circling, and they didn't know who they were. They were off quite a ways, but they were circling around. And after these planes got down, they lined out and come at us, and it was 7 Zeros. And they come over the field and just in a string, and they just going around in a merry-go-round, beating up everything they could. Now I didn't see any of this. I was up on the hill, and as soon as this gunfire started, I got off on the edge of the woods with some more people, and we lay down flat in the woods. But you could hear the guns. And Lieutenant Nichols, he got out and went somewhere, and then he had to run again, and one of the men with him, the one telling me the story, said they finally got in a ditch. The other pilots were up toward going up the hill to get something to eat. Now, Ed Buckner was driving a tug. You know what a tug is? It's a little like these riding lawnmower, and it pulls airplanes, you know,
Yeah, okay.
and pull baggage things. Well, he was driving a tug, and he had a trailer, and it had 8 or 9 50-gallon drums of fuel, and he was going across the field to the P-35s, but somebody had come in from Clark or from Nichols and landed a P-40, and we had a gasoline truck, and they were fueling this P-40. And Sergeant Wilson hollered at Buckner, bring that gasoline over here. And he just got there when these Zeros come in, so they all got under the plane or backside of the tug, and of course when the firing got pretty bad, why one of the boys got under the tug. They don't know how he got under it, but he got under it. And either the tug, either the gasoline tanker or the P-40 got on fire, and the hose was in it, tanker, and the fire ran down that and set the other on fire. So they thought they better get out of there, and they did. The little boy that got under the tug, they had a lot of trouble getting him out, but they pulled him out, and he got scratched, either out of the that or a piece of shell or something. But he's the only one that got hit that day. But they completely destroyed the airfield.
And this is where you were.
I was up on the hill in the woods, and my 2 clerks were with me, and we were laying there, and over here was a bunch of officers. I didn't know they were officers. They was over here, and during the first 5 minutes, something went psing, and Toyson, me, Reynolds, and Toyson, something hit Toyson's steel helmet. Ricochet. Bounced off his helmet. Didn't hurt him, but he was pretty well dead. And a little bit later, somebody started turning around over there and talking, getting ready to get up, and I hollered on to lay still that you'd be draw fire, and then I heard one of the other lieutenants tell this guy, whoever it was, said, yeah, he's right, stay put. There was a bunch of pilots over there. I didn't know I was hollering at officers. But anyway, we couldn't see anything, see, because we're back in the woods. But 2 of the guys in operations, when they went in the ditch under a pup tent, when this firing started, one of them looked at his watch, and when the last Zero left, it was 27 minutes. And they just shot those P-35s to pieces. set the gasoline stuff on fire. So Lieutenant Ben Brown had taken over as commanding officer, and he said, I think the best thing, we don't know what the situation is here. I said, I want all the men to go across the cane field about a half a mile to the Sugar Central. And we did. And then we regrouped in the Sugar Central. And
What Sugar Central?
well, it was a Del Carmen Sugar Central. It's where they make sugar. This cane field all brought in there, and it's cooked, and they had 2 or 3 big, huge tin buildings, and they had some quarters there, where the people lived, and a kind of commissary. And he wanted us to get in there where we get organized, because there was Philippine scouts patrolling the roads around there, and there were other units in that area, but we didn't know that. We just knew that he told us to go over there, and they sent some more people back that evening. But we stayed in the Sugar Central for about a week. Then we went back to the airfield, but some planes come in, other units, and we'd refuel them and arm them, and they'd leave. But we stayed there till Christmas Day. And on Christmas Day, they were going to feed the people in Sugar Central, going to give us a big Christmas dinner. But I was working. I had to load. We were loading tents and cots, and one of the jobs, I took 200 foot lockers over and lined them up in 2 rows in a big tin depot building, and drove off and left them. I looked back, and there's those 2 long rows of foot lockers, and I said, bye, boys. I don't think we'll ever see you again. This is all the personal possessions of all these people that they brought with them. You had to leave them. And we went out of there, finally got out of there. Most of them got out late in the afternoon, still leaving there in the evening. And I didn't know where we were going, but where we were going to Bataan. Well, we didn't go all the way. We went to Orani, which is about 15, 20 miles before you get into Bataan. And I set up early room in the schoolhouse, and the doctor set up his first aid station, and I was in one room, he was in the other. And the mess sergeant set up his field kitchens in the schoolyard behind chain link fence. And across the river was a little town of Orani. And at the right was an ice house where the mess sergeant kept some meat, and then the town was in there, and next to the ice house was a church with a big steeple. But the road to Bataan was right on down past all this. So all this people going into Bataan went right past us. I went back up the road one time in a truck, and we were supposed to go get some gasoline or something, and we never did get anything. But coming back, we got in a road jam. Now here this one road, 2-lane road, and it's packed solid with trucks, cars, and here we out, and I can see for about 2 miles behind us and 2 miles ahead of us, nothing but cars and trucks, and loaded with equipment, people, and these Japanese bombers going over in formation. No American airplanes anywhere. And they'd already bombed Corregidor or Manila or wherever, and they didn't bother with us. But we were sitting ducks, because all we could do was just peel out in the ditches. But now some guys got hit by those later on, but I was lucky that day. We didn't, nothing happened to us.
Did you know how bad the situation was at that time?
Not really. I knew we was in a war, and I knew we lost all our airplanes.
Now what day was this?
Well, 8th of December is when it started, and we moved on Christmas Day, see? So we're still getting rations, getting good rations, and we go down to Orani, and we're still getting good rations, because right around the corner there, about 15 miles by road, are all the docks in Manila where there's everything you need. So the mess sergeant's getting meat and supplies, and he's feeding good meals. Now over across the river, they had made a airfield through the rice fields there, and you had a runway. The 8030 bulldozed out another runway, and now the 21st at Nichols had these 18 P-40s, and they were getting them together. They weren't flying them, but they were getting them together. Well, they moved out of the Nichols up north of Orani, and they had an airfield, and they brought those 18 in there. But before they could fly, the Japanese infantry come down on them, and they had to get out. So they brought 9 of their P-40s to us at Orani, and they took 9 more on down the road a little bit more to the 17th Pursuit. So at this time, we have 9 P-40s and maybe 2 or 3 P-35s that can fly. And we operate there till the 7th of January, from the 26th of December to the 7th of January. However, the Japanese bombed us on January the 1st in Orani. They bombed the town real bad. I think they were trying to hit the bridge, but there was 2 gasoline trucks parked in a grove of trees hiding there, and they missed the bridge and hit those trucks. They didn't know how lucky they were. And they killed a lot of civilians and wounded a lot. The doctor had lots of wounded to take care of. And the next day, January the 2nd, there were no civilians in Irani. They were all gone. They took to the hills. But anyway, we left there on the 7th, just ahead of the Japanese coming in, and we went down to near Marbailey's, the tip of Bataan, and that's when we found out we were going to be infantry. Everybody got a... Now, before that, we had the 6 Lewises, the 12 Springfields, and the sergeants had 45s, about 45 pistols, and the officers had, but the other troops didn't have anything.
When they told you you're going to be infantry, what were your thoughts?
Well, it still didn't bother me. I mean, I'm in the orderly room. I'm sitting there with my safe and my typewriter in the orderly room. I ain't got no work to do. I did pay. I paid the payroll May the 30th. I went into Manila with Lieutenant Jennings, the officer, the adjutant, in a command car, and we went into a bank in Manila, and I told him how much money we needed, and he drew it. And the dirtiest money I ever saw in my life. That paper money, and then that metal money looked like it was made out of aluminum. A lot of it, copper and aluminum. But anyway, we got. For every dollar, we got 2 pesos in either paper money or change. And we came back, and on December 1st or November 30th, one of those days, we paid the troops. And I went over to the post office and bought a $50 money order, U.S. money order, made out to my mother, and mailed it on Pan American Clipper. She never got it. That clipper never made it. But just a week earlier, I mailed a letter to my Virginia, and I got it back there. It's a little airmail. It's Pan American Clipper. It's stamped in Manila, November 28th. It went through. The money order didn't get through. There at Baguio, I'm left in the order room, but 2 of the 3 of the sergeants are dividing the enlisted men up into troops, and they're taking them out in this jungle brush. You know, you can hardly see through it, and trying to show them how to run a skirmish line, you know, how to get in line of skirmish and go. They're doing this, and it's hot as a dickus. And of course, we're still eating good. And on the way down into Bataan, we picked up a lot of trucks. We even picked up one Filipino bus. The buses there were seats in front and a truck in the back. And the back part was loaded with about 60 or 80 big sacks of flour. Anyway, we got the bus, we got a Canadian truck, we picked up 2 or 3 American trucks, and most of them were loaded. And our mechanics got them to running again, and we kept them. So when we went on down into further down, we stayed in Baguio about 3 days there, getting these guns and getting a little organized. Then we got a new commanding officer. His name was Robert S. Ray, and he was a pilot from the 2nd Observation Squadron. And he introduced himself, told us he was a mean SOB, and he intended to stay a mean SOB. And well, that isn't the words he used, and he did. But anyway, I learned later that he had a choice. We could fly, or we could go on beach defense. And he chose to go on beach defense instead of flying. So that's the reason we went. We went on down on the west coast of Bataan on a bay called Agaloma Bay. And it had 2 points. The 2 high cliffs on each side was Quinaon Point and Agaloma Point. And the river that flowed down in there was Agaloma River, come off of Mount Marvellis. Clear stream, something like these clear water streams up east of here, Spring Creek, Illinois River. This is what's left of my pocketbook. I carried it all through the march and the prison. They never took it away from me. And this is a roster that I typed up in Cabanatuan on April the 10th. No, September the 1st, 42, of the 34th Pursuit. And Astor shows the ones that are dead at that time. And when I was there, I made myself a service record. And on the 24th of July, 1945, I figured I was going to die, so I wrote a will. This witness is still alive. And I was telling you about getting promoted. I was a private first class on 11th to 1st to 41. I was a corporal the 15th, January the 15th, and I was a sergeant the 15th of February. That's how fast that promotions came.
You ever come to Oklahoma City?
Oh, I had an office in the federal building there for about 6 years, but I hardly ever went there.
What I'd like to do is for you to come down, bring this, and let us copy it and give it back to me.
Look at this. It was a brand new notebook I picked up in Orani. And when we left there on the 7th, I took it down into Baguio, Little Baguio, and on down to Agaloma, and I carried it on the march. I went into O'Donnell with it.
That's in shorthand.
And the officer that was inspecting our going into O'Donnell when he took a stamp and stamped this little stamp. Now this is all blank, understand? And they took some stuff away, quite a bit of stuff away from it. I had one of those Curvex concave mirrors, steel mirrors, and this little Japanese private that was searching my stuff got so enthralled with that he never did search my stuff. So I didn't lose anything except the mirror. He kept the mirror. And then the officer stamped this book, and ever since he stamped it, nobody's ever bothered me. I could interpret that for you, but it'd take a little while.
Yeah.
Arrived Japan Port Emoji October the 4th, 1943. Landed October the 5th, 1943. Interned Hirohata Prison Camp October the 6th, 1943, near Kobe, near Osaka. This is in O'Donnell on June 4th, 1942. This is what I did that day. This is June 4th, 1943, 1 year later in Cabanatuan, what I did that day. This is the roster of the 34th Pursuit Squadron. Same thing it's on here, except I've got their serial numbers. Now, this is the same roster, except I'm putting 3 men to a page. 3 or 4 men to a page. And it goes on clear over here to the last private.
Did the groups, the squadrons, try to get together within the camp?
They couldn't. They were assigned to barracks, but we'd hold bull stations at night. Some of us would get in one place and some in another, and we'd see them on work details, but generally it was impossible. You had too many personal problems to want to get together. Just staying alive was a big thing.
And how were they assigned? Did the Japanese?
Well, the Japanese or the American headquarters did it. I don't know who did it. They had, see, the American headquarters inside ran the camp. The Japanese on the outside told them what they should do. But what I'm getting at is, this is these people, and here is Long Donovan. He was an airplane mechanic first class. He's got the same type of serial numbers I have. He come from this area. It's 18 million. He was killed in a car accident in Las Vegas in 1966. His next of kin was Bell S. Klein, Austin, Colorado. He went to Japan, and he got back to PI on the way home. That I know. Now, and then somebody later told me that he got killed in '66. This guy was in Hirohata with me, and I didn't know he was there. He was one of those 100 that come in at last, and he was in the same building with me, and he wasn't more than 100 feet from me sleeping, and I never even knew he was there the whole 2 years.
Were you ever at Davao?
Where?
Davao?
No, that's Mindanao. That's way south.
You were at Cabanatuan and O'Donnell.
Well, see, Cabanatuan and O'Donnell are near Clark Field in Manila. They're on Luzon, whereas Davao detail was on Mindanao, and that was several hundred miles to the south, the Big Island.
And were people removed from Cabanatuan?
Oh yeah, work details. A great big detail went to Davao, another big detail went to Japan, and another one went to Mukden. And then in 43 they started sending them 300 or 400, 600, 800 at a time to Japan. The ones that were physically able to work, the ones that couldn't, they kept back. And then they had a lot of guys working in the Philippine Islands on long-time work details with Japanese. But when things started getting rough, they put them on these ships, and they whole bunch, especially officers, and they went down in these ships because they were looking control. And I said 6-6. It was 5-6. We had him missing in action or dead in February. He got picked up and taken to Corregidor, and he died May 6th when Corregidor fell. He was fighting on the line. But you can have that. But these are the names of the people that came home. These are the ones that died. This group here and all these, they died. And only 6 of them died in the war. And that last letter is a picture of those things. And they were all out of the old bunch. None of the new people were in the war dead. It's strange, but it was the old bunch that got killed.
Not too many people would have just remained at Cabanatuan throughout.
There was a group that had legs off and arms off, and weren't, or for one reason or another they kept them there. It was quite a group. The Rangers released them.
Seriously injured.
The Rangers released them.
Right, I knew there were some still there.
A friend of mine was there. He had one arm, and he stayed there and was released. There's so much of this. Now, you can turn it back on anytime you want to. I just wanted to. Now, all I got home with was that notebook, this wallet. I'm a cagey joker. I had Lieutenant Jennings sign this one. I went to the American headquarters and typed this up because I worked there for a little while. And this is just like an Army service record. And I also, Lieutenant Jennings was wounded at Agaloma, and another officer, John N. Raker. I had him sign the other one. I got 2 of these. And then later on, this is the camp commander certifying I was a prisoner of war. This is a will I made. And on the way home at Yokohama, I ran into Robert S. Ray, the commanding officer, and I had him sign this certificate that I had been promoted 1 extra time.
Why at that point in July of 45 were you very ill when
Yep,
you made that?
yep. I figured if this thing kept on like it was, I wasn't going to make it very much longer, so I didn't have anything to will, but I wrote a will anyway, because that was the thing to do.
What was your main health problem very there? Was it something?
Well, I was down to about 98 pounds. Like I say, I only weighed 125, and I got down to about 98, and I went to work one morning. Well, I fell, hurt my back, loading slag. I fell on a gangplank of a gondola car loading slag, and I turned over and hit on my back, and it was kind of hard to, I had to walk 3 or 4 miles to work. And shortly after that, I was out in the line in the morning, and I just passed out. And they brought me in, and the doctor got me a week's off, and then he got me another week off, and he finally got me a 3rd week, maybe a 4th. Anyway, I had to go back to work. Then they put me on there's about 60 men that were too weak to work, but they walked us down to the mill, and we were supposed to be knocking down rice paddies, and we just piddle around all day. Called it WPA gang. I don't know whether you know what WPA is or not. You don't know what
Like
WPA?
from the Depression?
Yeah, it's a works of progress administration.
I call it we fiddle around.
That's what we did.
Let me ask.
Is this on?
Yeah. You're on battalion, and things getting bad. What did you do in the Battle of Battalion?
I hate to say it, because I do have, I've got the documents to prove it. I have the infantry combat badge and the Bronze Star, but I only fired 1 shot in that war, and I shot at a hog and missed him. But my unit fought. See what happened to us. Now we went in there, and we got this beautiful bay and this sandy beach and these high cliffs, and we're scattered all around these cliffs and bay as beach patrol. The whole 200 men are lined out in little squads, and nothing happens. Nothing happens. We go in there on about the 10th of January. Well, on the 22nd of January, the Japanese come down in a ship with a lot of barges, and they come in. Now, they're not going to land on us. They're going to land north of us, about 5 miles north of us, and cut Wainwright's line. But for comedy of errors, currents and wind or misdirection, they land in 3 places. And one little bunch lands down near Mount Bayless, and the Navy takes care of them. Another group lands up north in the 17th Pursuit, but about 1,000 of them come and land in on us. Now, they don't land in our bay, but they land on our far northern end of where we go. There's a ravine between us and the next point, and they land in that ravine. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, a patrol of Japanese come up out of that ravine, and that's our far north point. We've got 4 machine guns across that north point, and then here's the bay, and then here's Agaloma Point. Well, they come up out of this gully, and they come up, and John Morrell's a cook, and he's on this gun for some reason. I guess they had too many cooks. And he hollers, "Hey guys, come on over." He thinks they're Filipinos. Well, they shoot him. Well, the gun crew opens fire on them, and they go back in the gully. Well, they tell the commanding officer that, and he don't seem to think that Agaloma had phoned in and said, "We see lights coming in," you know. That'd been going on for a couple, 3 hours, and he don't pay attention to it. But when that firing starts, he gets real upset. And Lieutenant Jennings takes a group down, and he puts them around the bay, and the creek's here, and he puts some on, the little footbridge goes across it. He puts some over, he put most of them over here, and he says, "Now if they come down on you, fall back across this bridge." Well, they never come out of that gully that night. They were in there. The next morning, Lieutenant Jennings takes about 3 of the sergeants and staff sergeants and some buck sergeants and corporals and a bunch of men, and he gets them up there, and he gets them in a big long line, you know, and they're going to start this advance down on this. They figure there's just a few Japanese in there. Well, they start in, and the machine gun opens up on them, and Lieutenant Jennings gets hit in the knee, and Paul Duncan from Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, gets hit in the thigh, and he bleeds to death later on. You can't get to him to pull him out, and when they do get him out, it's a little too late. Lieutenant Palford gets hit in the shoulder, and 2 or 3 more get some minor injuries. But anyway, they're pinned down all that day and all that night, and they get out the next morning, and then help starts coming in. We get some more Air Corps people come in, and the scouts come in, and 803rd engineers come in. But anyway, there's a full colonel comes in who was in the 26th Cavalry, and he has been made a brigadier general, and he tells our commanding officer that there's only a handful in there, and he's going to organize a turkey shoot for Lieutenant Ray to send about a dozen men to beat the brush and put another dozen on the beach, and when they run out, well, shoot them. Well, of course, we get about 15 Purple Hearts that day. No one gets killed, but we get about 15 Purple Hearts, and they bring in the 155s, and the 88th brings in two half tracks with 75s, and we get all kinds of troops in there. And on the 1st of February now, this started on 22nd January, 1st of February, the Japanese try to reinforce, and they bring some more barges in. Full moon, and you can read it. There's several books on it. I've got Grazio's book. He flew on that. There's about a dozen or more barges, and they don't anybody get ashore. Now this keeps on going on. That's the 1st of February. They bring in a tank company. The tank gets down there, and they lose it. They can't get back. It's this hilly country. It's not, it's timber and hilly. This reinforcement don't work, so they finally get them down pretty well eliminated. By the 8th of February, Captain Dice in the 21st Pursuit comes up in 2 whale boats and 2 armored boats, and they get the last of them wiped out in this gully. And then the dive bombers retaliate, and they hit these boats, and they kill 2 or 3 and a couple 3 lost legs. In retaliation, they dropped some bombs on us too, and one of them hit one of our gun emplacements, and we lost Orville Cox. The bomb hit on him. Never found him, and the boy that was still at Cabanatuan lost his arm. Sharp lost his arm in that. And my good friend down in Texas that I travel with on this convention, he lost his eardrums and got shrapnel in him, and another boy got minor shrapnel. But that was the last. That was it. And for us, the war's over. We go back to the beach defense, and we never have any more. But they counted there's between 600 and 800 bodies in that ravine. And there was a lot more than just a dozen in there.
How bad was the fighting there at Bataan?
Oh, the real fighting up on Wainwright's line?
Yeah.
I wasn't there, but it was pretty bad, especially for the Filipinos. The scouts. Now, the scouts are about the best soldiers you'll ever find. They were trained by the U.S. Army, but the Philippine constabulary would just fade away. The 31st Infantry did a lot to hold that line together, and then the Air Corps was all put into, the ground people were all put into what they call provisional infantry. They had it, and it was rough up on the line. That's that line that was trying to hold them coming down, and it fell back a couple, 3 times.
Now, what exactly is Wainwright's line?
Well, it first started out from about just a little bit south of Orani. I've got to think about it now. Yeah, south of Orani, below Orani, and went over to Subic Bay. And then when that started breaking, they dropped back and got a shorter line. I don't know. I've got it all in books here, and I got maps that show it, but I can't remember the names of it. And they dropped back, and then they dropped back when they're right down into Bataan itself, between Mount Samat and the bay. And along about Good Friday, they really poured the artillery in there, and they come over the mountain, and that line just dissolved.
Over the mountain.
Yeah, Mount Samat and Marvelis. They didn't go over Marvelis; they come around it. See, Bataan looks like Florida, and the whole center is high mountains, and you just travel around the outside. I mean, they crossed here from Orani to Subic Bay. That was the main idea to hold that. But as they drop back down, they just keep dropping back down. The Japanese. Now there, where we are, the gunfire, you can see the lightning at night. Looks like lightning, and hear the thunder. And next night it's a little louder and a little closer. And along about the 6th of April, it's just continuous flash and thunder. That's these guns, these artillery firing. The 200 Coast Artillery and the 515th from New Mexico. They're anti-aircraft, but they've got their anti-aircraft guns firing as field pieces. And then they had lots of 75s, old World War I 75s up there. But now we're kind of in this resort area down here on the bay, and once we got the Japanese out, there's no problem. This road up there is up on the, halfway up the mountain above us. We're out of it until we're told that the night of the 8th of April, there's an earthquake, a real heavy earthquake, and I'm sleeping on a cot. I managed to get me a cot in a mosquito bar. That's one reason I don't think I ever got too sick. And bombers had dropped bombs, Japanese bombers, and cut some of these trees, and the doc used one of these clearings made by these bombs for his hospital, and we had the orderly room and the supply there. Well, when this earthquake comes, some of these bomb-cut trees started falling. You know, they were already weakened. And I was sleeping on a cot, and our old cot's shaking, and all of a sudden there's a tree comes down, and the end of that tree is right at the end of my cot. If it had been just a little bit more, it had smashed me another 3 feet. Then they start, early in the morning, they start blowing up all that ammunition down there at Marvelas, you know, the ammunition dumps, and it's just like another earthquake. Only this time you can feel the concussion. And then we get word, I don't know how, but somebody said, hey, we're surrendering, we're supposed to destroy our rifles and go out on the main road and go down to Marvelas.
What was your thoughts at that point?
I'm standing there. I mean, I don't know really what my thoughts were. Of course, I'm kind of letting it soak in that there is a surrender. And Campbell comes up and says, Gage, says, look at those dumb Joes over there. They built a fire, and they were throwing the 45s in it. And they were throwing the bolts of the rifles out in the woods and stacking the rifles up. And along about this time, some old boy didn't take a clip out of his 45, and it started going off. And he comes up to me and he says, look at those dumb Joes. He says, they don't have the slightest idea what they're in for. He says, come on. And we had one of these 18-wheeler trailer type things for a supply. He says, let's go in there. So we went in there, and Lordy Lord, there's all kinds of stuff in here. And he says, put on clean new khaki shirt and trousers, and get an extra pair, and get all the socks you can get. And if you can find a pair of shoes fit, you put them on. I found a pair of 7 triple E's. That's what I wear. I put those on, and some underwear, Army field bag. We didn't have a infantry bag. We just had a bag that you carry over your shoulder. And so he and I, we got all we could go, and the trucks were coming down, and they load up with men standing in the back, and they go up. We thought they was going up to the main road, see, and then they'd come back down and get another load and take them up. So I got on about the second or third truck I got on, and we didn't get up to the road. We got within about a quarter of a mile. We still had to walk up the hill. And when I unload, there's a guy coming around the corner of a path, and he's carrying a carton, you know, of carnation milk. And about this time, the guys on that truck hit him, and you ever seen one of these football huddles where everybody just piles on? They all piled on this guy, and every once in a while, a guy would come crawling out of that pile with 2 or 3 cans of milk in his hand. And finally it just dissolved, and the guy that had the original carton, I don't think he had any left. They had to take, you know. But what had happened is the first truck come down, some Filipinos come down and wanted to sell some canned goods. Well, whether they bought any, I don't know, but when they evidently did, because the Filipinos had to go back to get some more. And when they went, they followed them, and right around the corner was a huge dump of food. Now, we've been on half rations, and then we got on quarter rations. We've been on quarter rations for almost 2 months. Hardly eating anything. 1 meal a day, and it was rice and a little salmon, or rice and a little horse meat, or something like that. Not very much. And here, when we went in, I told you we took all this food. Well, when this general come down to organize this quail hunt, he got the captain told the mess sergeant to really feed the general, feed him good, you know. I think he's brown nosing what he's doing. But anyway, and the general, he eats this meal, but then we hear his trucks are coming down to get our food. Well, the mess sergeant buried some of it in pits with tents on them, but he got about 2/3 of our food. Well, when we go out on April the 9th, here's all this food dump up there, and there's sea rations and chocolate bars and coffee and a lot of our flour and that stuff he took away from us is still there. That headquarters up there had been eating pretty good, but we loaded up. Well, I got on a truck, and the truck took us on up. Somebody said, if you're going to get on, you better get on. Well, I was going to get some water in my canteen. I had dumped it to get some coffee. I don't drink coffee, but I thought, well, I'd get some coffee. Guys would make it in a wash tub, and I was torn between getting coffee, getting water at the faucet, or getting on that truck. I better get on that truck, so I got on without any water. Well, they packed them in that truck, just, you know, on the back, standing up, And we got up the road, and there's 2 more trucks up there, and they're all packed. There's just many men that can get in. And one truck's pulling another one, and the third one's 2 running and 1 being pulled. And we start down to Marvelis, which I guess is maybe 10, 15 miles down the road. And in the meantime, as we're getting on it, our commanding officer comes out with a couple of cars and puts all the officers in it, and they run. I know what they're doing. They're headed for Marvelis to get to Corregidor. They just run off and left us, the commissioned officers. Well, on the way down, I didn't see it. I was on this side of the truck, but Betts told me he saw it. The Japanese tank company caught the officers, and they had them off the road, and they were searching them. Well, we get to Marvelis, and they pull off on the side of the road, and we stand on those trucks, and we don't get off. And it's hot, and we stand there all afternoon. And the Japanese let 1 or 2 men down at a time, but then they make them get right back up. And when they let me down, I went over to the ditch and filled my canteen full of ditch water. And one of the medics gave me a small bottle of iodine, and I put about a big shot of that iodine in the water. That's when I resolved that from then on I wasn't going to get caught short on water, if I could help it. But anyway, we stay on those trucks all night. It turns out that the Japanese officer that's got this guard that's holding us there won't turn us out till we were officially surrendered by a commissioned officer. Well, Lieutenant Markham, who was assigned to the 34th because of we had a submarine gun mounted in concrete, he comes along that morning and tells them that he's with the 34th, and they accept it, and they let us down. But we don't go to Marvelis and start the march. We go back up the road, and they put us down in a little valley where they're holding 1,000 or more Americans. Now this is the 10th, and we're there all day the 11th, and we're practically there all day the 12th. In other words, we're 3 days late getting out on this march. But when we get in there on the 10th, we get together. Now, you was asking if we ever got together. We did. The 34th got up on a little hill that had a couple of trees, and there's a creek down in this place so we can get water. And we get together. And we all got these field bags, and most of us are loaded with this stuff that we got. Well, we get together, and like in a town meeting, we think it might be a good idea if we pool all this food. We got our mess sergeant and our cooks with it, and let him try to organize it in some kind of order and give everybody a ration. And maybe he could make it last a couple of meals. We don't know how long we're going to be there, and we don't have a whole lot of food. Well, this is fine, except for the jokers that's got big heavy bags of stuff. They won't cooperate. They go off on their own. And when he's serving this first batch of food, here comes these officers in, and the captain jumps in the line right at the front, and everybody tells him to get lost. And he says, no, he's going to get his share, and if we don't cooperate, he court-martial all of us. Well, a lieutenant colonel in the Air Corps comes over, and he tells the captain to get lost. He says, I know your story. You run off and left these men. Take off. And of course, we're a little unhappy. There's a couple of officers in there we'd like to accommodate, but you know, if you take one, you got to take them all. So on the 3 o'clock on the 12th of April, they put us out on the road, and we go up what they call a zigzag. It's a road that zigzags up out of the valley, and that's why it's called Little Baguio, because up north in the mountains, to go to Baguio, you go up a big zigzag. Well, this zigzag is why they call this Little Baguio. And we get up to where Hospital 2 was up on top, and that's where we stop for the night. And we just fall off in the thickets. And the next morning we get back out on the road, and we start, and we're not marching and we're not being pushed, we're just going. Just going in a crowd up the road, and as long as you keep moving, there's no problem. And then you get down about 3 or 4 miles, and the guard changes, and this guard may want to go faster, and then you start pushing them. And somewhere down the line there, we got one day there, about the 3rd day, well, the 2nd day, we go across the Cabin airfield, which was a runway just cut right out of the jungle from the mountain out to the bay, and they just fly off that runway off across the bay. When we get to Cabin, there's a Japanese truck company coming down, going into Bataan with munitions and supply. And here's about 3,000 of us POWs, and we're standing along this side of the road, and this truck company comes in, and over here's Corregidor. And they can see these trucks coming in, and they can see us standing here. But right on Cabin, there are 4 big Japanese guns mounted right out on the runway. Well, Battery Way over there finally turns loose with those 12-inch mortars and starts firing. And the first shot hits up on the side of the hill on the other side of Cabin and hits something because it sets a lot of things on fire. And when they come over, it's just like a big freight train going right over your head. the Japanese want us to stand there to protect those trucks, but we all fall in the ditch, and they're falling in the ditch too, because these 12 inchers are coming over, and one of them hit the first gun, blew it up. Because when trucks all get past, they tell us to get back on the road, and we start up, and I can look over here and see this one gun. There's a big black observation balloon up in the sky on this mountain, Japanese observation balloon. And as we go up the tail end of our column, when it gets about to Cab Cabin, there's one more round comes in from Corregidor, and it's pretty close to the road because one or two people got hit in that tail end group, but I don't think they got hit too bad. That's the way it goes. A couple of days later, about 300 in my group, we're setting the road there, and there's a shack, on stilts off the right, and two Japanese officers arguing. And I've always believed that one was saying, I'm going to kill them, and the other one says, you can't do it. And they argued for about an hour. And I mean, they really argued. These are sword-carrying officers. And finally, I guess the one prevailed because they told us to mount up and go, and we left. But I still think that one old boy wanted to get rid of us so we wouldn't have to fool with it. A little later on, we're going past a rock wall, and artillery outfits over here in the woods, and they're sitting on the wall and they're hollering at us, we're going by. And one Japanese hollers, it's in perfect English Brooklynese you ever heard, you suckers, are going to lose the war. He's a Japanese that had been raised in the States. And about that time, a little bandy-legged Japanese came out and jerked my shoulder bag off. But I didn't have much in it. I'd got a hold of an army pack, and I'd put all my stuff in the army pack, and what he got, if I remember, I still had my steel helmet and Hemingway's For Whom the Bells Toll. It was in that bag. That's all he got. Is that thing still running?
I think so.
You think so?
I'm not sure.
But and one time a Japanese come out and wanted to get my ring, and I was foolish to be wearing it, and it wouldn't come off, and I just kept pulling, and I got away from him. But when he got away, I managed to get it off and put it in my pocket. So, and I had rimless glasses. They had gold mounts, over earpieces, and no rims on them. And I made it through. I got home with, you can see the ring. There's the ring right there, and there's the glasses. They were still in there. I got home with those. But a lot of guys had their glasses taken away, and they just threw it on the ground and stomped on them, just pure meanness.
Did they search you?
Oh, yeah, we got searched several times, but fortunately I never was bothered much. Some guys lost everything they had.
I've heard that there was some mistreatment by the Japanese on the march.
Here and there. Here and there.
What would cause the mistreatment?
Well, if you had anything in the way of Japanese money, or if you were one of those suckers that went over there in that gully and knocked the gold teeth out of those dead Japanese and had them in your pocket, you were in trouble. And one officer, I understand, got beheaded because he argued with them. But I never saw any of that. And like I say, we started 3 days late. There were no dead bodies on the road. There was one Filipino on the road before we got to Irani over on this side, and I think he was civilian. And in one of the bayous up there where we went close to an arm of it that came in close, there was a half a dozen swollen bodies in civilian clothes just floating in that. And just before we got to Irani, there were 2 dead Japanese mules laying there. Now, the reason I know is because on the 5th of May out of O'Donnell, I got to go to work in San Fernando on a truck detail, 15 truck Japanese quartermaster hauling ammunition out of Bataan back up to the freight trains in San Fernando. And those 2 mules were just 2 greasy spots, and where that Filipino had been, there was some clothes and a greasy spot there. And the bodies, I never did see the bodies in the water. They disappeared one way or another. But I never saw anything on the road. Now, some of our people, Sam Bass got hit with the bayonet, got hit, and it bad. And Shorty Colson got punched with one when he's trying to get water. The problem was, when we got into the area where the artesian wells were, these are pipes about this big around, and they're standing out of the ground about this high, and the water just pours out. Artesian. The guys who want to go over there and get their canteens filled, and they'd hold them with a chain, and the canteen's got a little tiny mouth. About 6 or 8 guys would be in there shoving and pushing, and no one's getting any water, because when you get in there, somebody shove you out. Well, the first time we did that, I decided there's got to be a better way, and I kept my eyes peeled, and I found a can about this big around, about that long, in the ditch. And I got it and put it down in a sock. I had plenty of socks. and I'd carry that by the sock, and we come one of those, I'd go up there and get the edge and push under there, and all that water cascading down. I'd fill that can up in about 3 seconds. And I'd pull it and get back on the road, and if there was a Jap guard coming, I was long gone before he got there. And then I could pour the water in the canteen and carry that wet sock, and then it kind of cool that water. Now we're talking about 100, 110 degrees heat in this dusty road. And we went through the cane fields, and a Japanese guard we had took his bayonet and cut cane for us. Some of them wouldn't let him do anything. And we stopped one place, and there was a turnip field there, and they even let me go look in the turnip field for turnips. I didn't find any turnips. I found a couple of skulls. But other people had guards that wouldn't, were real mean. But I lucked out. That one fellow tried to take my ring off. It's the only time I really had any trouble. And I did see one Japanese non-com had 2 Japanese privates, and I went along the road, went up along here, and I could look down on it, and he was just chewing them out and slapping them around, and I figured what he did, he probably caught them mistreating prisoners, stealing from them or something, because he was sure giving him a rough time. But a lot of guys lost everything they had. They were searched, and anything they had, they took it away from them. Now, when we went into this pen, you know I told you about, they made us turn everything in, all our military equipment. And Campbell come up again and says, Gage, says, look, we got to do something. He says, let's go down here. They got that sentry watching this stuff. Let's take and stack some of this stuff. Let's stack some canteens together and get some pack sacks, and you know, and kind of, and he'll think we're really helping. He says, every time you get a chance, put something on. Well, we did that. We worked there for about an hour, and we carried a little stuff around. And I put on a web belt, and I had canteen on. I got a canteen with a cover and a cup. I had one on each side, and I found an Army infantry pack, and I got a mess kit and knife, fork, and spoon, and I put that pack on, and after we worked a little bit, well, we just took off, and we looked at him. He knew damn well what we was doing, but he didn't care, and he didn't take it away from us, see. So I went out on the road. We went on the road real well equipped. Now, I saw Campbell the first day, not the first day, the 12th, but on the 13th. The road went in a big curve around a creek, and you could cut across, and they let us cut across. Some of us cut across. And Campbell and Brawl were down there taking a bath in that creek. So I stopped and washed my feet. Campbell had told me every time I get a chance, he says, wash your feet and change your socks. You won't get any blisters. I walked that whole 75 or 80 miles in new shoes and never got a blister. But I changed my socks several times. But I'm lucky. I'm lucky. A lot of people never had an opportunity to do this, or maybe they didn't have the forethought. And when we get to O'Donnell, we get a welcoming speech from the little bandy leg commander, and he tells us that we're not prisoners of war, we're hostages, and so on, and his best wish is that we never leave there alive. And he gives the same speech to each group that comes in. And then they searched us, and this is when they took a lot of stuff. But like I say, that old boy got enthralled with my mirror, and he didn't take anything, and the officer stamped me okay, and I went in with most everything I had.
How long did the march take?
Took me 14 days. Some of them did it in 4 or 5. It was about 80 miles.
Why the difference between you?
Well, like I say, we got delayed 3 days, see, you know, and then you can only go so far, and they throw you off in the evening, and then they put you back on in the morning, you start again, and you get held up, or some of them were march forward and march back. All kinds of crazy things went on.
How were the guards?
I'll tell you, I forgot to tell you, I can't think of the name of it, but it was before we got to Arani. We were held in this place, and there was a big field, barbed wire fence around it, and it had a big tin barn in the center and a faucet. I was held there 4 days. I think the reason was they were getting too many people between here and San Fernando, where they were loading them on boxcars. They were loading them on these boxcars in San Fernando and taking them to Capas. And then it's about 60 miles, I think. And then they walked about 5 miles from Capas in to O'Donnell. And for some reason, they held me at this place. The name escapes me right now. They held me for 4 days there. Now, this is the first time they fed us anything. When we came in there, I got 1 rice ball, cold rice and a ball, about a little smaller than a baseball, and that's all we ever got in the way of food. When we got into San Fernando, which is about 3 days later, now from there we made a long march to Arani. and we slept in pig pens there. And then from Irani on into San Fernando, and we got in there, they put us in a cockpit. Now this cockpit looks like a miniature bull ring, and they let us sit over in one section on the seats, and they let the Filipinos come in, and they could give us limes and coconut candy, and there was plenty of water. And I think I was there that night and probably the next night. And then I got on this boxcar early in the morning, and then we had to walk from Capas. Now I've got pictures of the boxcars and Capas and San Fernando here, right there in that stuff. What I was going to show you if you was interested in it.
Yeah.
These are iron boxcars, and the temperature's 110 outside, and they pack these people in there standing. There's no room.
How were the guards spaced on the march?
Well, evidently every 3 or 4 miles you went out of one area into another, and they changed the guards. And the first 2 or 3 days it must have been hell, because they wanted to get those people out of there so the Japanese could get in. They're still fighting Corregidor. They fight Corregidor for another month. So people got run over and stomped on and mashed and everything else in those first days, and probably mistreated. But when I went along, there was no evidence of this. It's all been, if there's dead, they've been cleared away. And they won't let the Filipinos give us anything. They try, but they won't let us.
But I mean, are the guards just spaced along as you
No,
march
they go
along?
with it. You got 300 or 400 men in a group, and you got 10 or 15 guards, and they go with you. Their area, which it could be 3, 4, 5, 6 miles, whatever it is, or all that day. I don't know. And then all of a sudden they leave and you get another group.
You have guards in front and back.
Well, they're walking
sides.
along with you. They're just walking along with you. Now you read these stories that these guys falling out, and you hear them shooting them back here, and some of them seeing them bayonet. We didn't have that problem. We've had 3 or 4 people got hurt on the march, but not bad. Beck, I don't know what happened. Beck was going blind around about Irani, and he fell out. And his body was recovered from a rice paddy at Irani. Actus was a big man, a big fellow, and he got almost to San Fernando, and he died. Now, what or how, I don't know. It could have been natural. It could not be. But we only lost 2 men. We had about 6 take off. 2 got away for 18 months and then got recaptured. The other 4, I don't know whatever happened to them. But they did not die on the march, because the Army has recovered their bodies some distance from the march. So they got away for a while. There's only about, in that list there's only about 6 or 7 I don't know what happened to. But I do know where they died. Then there's 2 or 3 that I just got plain question marks. I don't know what happened to. But I don't know whether you realize it, but did you realize what a tremendous chore to accumulate this information on 238 men and officers? I'm still working on it.
How many men made the march? Approximately.
You mean?
No, Americans.
Oh.
Or allies.
Okay, there were 12,000 men, roughly, a little less than 12,000 Americans on Bataan. There was several hundred of them in the hospitals. There was quite a few got over to Corregidor, and there's a small bunch got into the mountains. But almost a little over 8,000 of them reached O'Donnell. Like I say, Falk is calculated that and these counts the guys that was killed in the last day of the war that they're missing, see? That 650 could have died on the march or not. They did not get to O'Donnell for one reason or another. Now he's eliminating the ones in the hospital. He's counting those, because he has a pretty good count how many there were in the 2 hospitals. They were later taken. Now one bunch at the hospital, they were standing along here in their hospital pajamas watching this, and the Japanese pushed them out and made them go on the march. But another bunch, they stayed in the hospital till middle of June, and they were trucked to Bilibid, and then they rode the train into Cabanatuan. My friend that got hit with the bomb on February 8th, he was in this group. I tell you what happened. If you read Falk's book, he pretty well spells it out. They weren't counting on anywhere near. They figured maybe 2,000 men would be in there on Bataan, Americans, and they were about a little over 11,000, and there was about 50,000 Filipinos soldiers, and about that many number of civilians in there. They never counted on that many people. Now the people who really had a rough time on the march was the American Indians.
Why?
Because the Japanese wanted to put them with the Filipinos. They made us, like, we marched separately. And they wanted to put the American Indians with the Filipinos, and we had a hard time convincing them that they were not Filipinos. Because every time you got a new bunch of guards, the guy'd get along so far, they want to jerk and put him over the Filipinos. Now, they had a high death rate. But like I said, I was lucky. I didn't see any atrocities at all. Not a one.
You said that you had a rice ball on the march?
One.
Is that
Now,
all?
no. We ate real good there in that valley, you remember, where we took our own food. So on the 11th and 12th, and we had pretty good eating there. And then we got out on the march. Now somewhere along in there, the old Filipino was sitting over on this side of the road, and we were going up the road, and the guards were pretty far apart. And he's got a little white sack, cloth sack in his legs there, and I figured that booger's got some rice. So I run over there, and I fish around my pocket, and the best I could come up with was a $20 American bill that I brought from the States with me. And I'm trying to give it to him. He's about 80, 90 years old. No. I just dropped the 20 and grabbed his sack and run. He couldn't chase me. He's too old. So when we got to this place where the barn was, I built a little fire. I never cooked any rice in my life. But my mother cooked it all the time, but I never paid any attention. But anyway, I put some water and some rice in my cup and built a tiny fire without any smoke, near as I can remember my Boy Scout days. And I held that cup over there and got it to boiling, and that water boiled out, and I figured I had rice, and I think I did it one more time, made me a cup of tea. I had some dry tea from somewhere. And I had one good batch of hot rice and tea during those 4 days, and I just had that cold rice ball earlier. But I heard later on that some guys got killed for building a fire there. But I was just lucky. But now, and then got some sugar cane in one place, and I don't know, you can go a long ways if you got water. And I managed to keep water. I learned my lesson down there that when they're trying to get that coffee, that water was more important than anything else. You drink water, you can go a long ways.
What about Camp O'Donnell? What happened there?
Okay. We were lucky. They put us in the boxcars early in the morning. And we were about 2 hours or 3 hours riding over there, and it never really got too hot. And Arthur Campbell was in my car. He was with me at this place where the barn was, and I went to get some water, and I lost him. And they moved us out that day, and I never did see him anymore till we got to San Fernando, and they put us in the cars, and he was in my car, and he crawled down in one end and went up a little ladder and kicked a little door open. You know, a little square door, kicked it open, and we got a little air in there. And of course, it still wasn't too hot that early morning. And after we got to rolling, somebody opened our door. We didn't have any Japanese guards in there with us, and nobody ever objected. So we had the door open, and we were standing pretty well packed, but not too packed. And because we're getting down there at the tail end of this thing, the bulk of the people have already got into O'Donnell. I think I got in there about the next to the last day that the big groups come in. But anyway, we get off in Capas, and we have to march about 5 miles, I think, up there. And as I come into camp, the river's over here, and here's this camp over here, these Nipa and Swally huts, you know, barracks. Some of them are tumbled down, they just never got finished. And there are people in them, and there are Filipinos going along 2 at a time with a bamboo pole, and they got a blanket with a body in it, and they're going up towards the river and going off that way. They went to the Filipino cemetery, is where they're going. But down here in this river are the Filipinos. They're drinking, bathing, and urinating in this water. And I thought, boy, I hope we don't have to drink this water. Now we get into camp, and we're Air Corps, so right away, all the Air Corps put over here in this corner. And we've got a faucet. And it runs a little bit, but the next day they get it to run and run water. So to my knowledge, we never had any problem getting water, and it's water out of a well. But our people are dying. See the list there of O'Donnell? Mm-hmm. They're dying from this march, and we haven't had any food for about 2 months that amount to anything. So they just burn out, and a lot of them are disconsolate. They just lost all hope. I remember there in O'Donnell, we used to get 5 or 10 of the 34th together, and the only 2 was Campbell and I, that everybody was saying the boats were going to be in Civic Bay tomorrow, the transports to take us home. And we said, no way. You just better settle down. And in other words, Campbell and I argued all along that this is going to be a long haul, and you better more or less prepare yourself mentally and physically that you're going to be here quite a while, because there's no way they're going to come 3,000 or 4,000 miles and We don't even know that Pearl Harbor's happened. See, we don't even know that. And I know we're not going to get, we're a long ways from Australia and we're a long ways from Hawaii. So I don't see how in the world anybody's going to come get us tomorrow. But a lot of them give up hope when 3 or 4 days or a week went by and there's no relief. 33 staff sergeants, I think all but about 3 of them died right off the bat. The young married ones died quick. I don't understand just whether it was mental or physical. But I get a little diarrhea, and somebody says, well, Gage, go down to the cook shack and get some of that clean charcoal and eat it. That'll help. Well, it don't help much, but then another guy says, you see those bushes over there? You get a handful of those leaves and chew them up. They'll help. Well, I tried that. Must have. Dysentery went away. I mean, my diarrhea went away. I never did have dysentery. But anyway, 5th of May. They say there's a truck down there on the road and they need 30 men. If you can climb up on the truck, you can go. Well, I went down there and got up on it, and one of the guys couldn't quite make it, and we gave him a hand up. We got him up, and we go back to San Fernando, where we got on the boxcars, and they take us into this block. It's a whole block of buildings, and it's hollow in the center. And the Japanese have got this whole area, and it's a 15-truck quartermaster outfit. They take us upstairs in a room about this big, and the 2 Japanese non-coms, 6'3", 250, 300 pounds, huge people, are in charge of us. And they got a tent set up in this room, and we're to sleep these 30 men, we sleep all around this tent, and they're in charge of us. So the next morning, they go down and they explain, they put 2 of us to a truck, 15 trucks. And we're going to ride these trucks down into Bataan, and we're supposed to help load. Well, we get down there, and they get us out there, and they're loading these humongous Japanese artillery shells. Because this is about May 6th, and Corregidor's gone under. So they're going to get their ammunition out of there. And they hoorah us about 10, 15 minutes, and all 30 of us couldn't lift one shell. And they said, forget it. Get out, get away, go away. And these Japanese take these shells and run them up the gangplanks and load them in the truck. So in about an hour, they're ready to go, and they said, let's go. But in the meantime, we've been snooping around and salvaging anything we can and scavenging, and I've got a good shirt and some more equipment stuff. We go back, and that night they fed us the first night real good. The next night they feed us real good. We get lots of rice and soup, and we go back up in that room, and the next morning we go, and all we have to do is air, water, and gas, and wipe the windshield. Go down, we go off and hunt. When they get loaded, now we have about 10, 12 days of this, and they let us trade with the Filipinos in this, get stuff. We can get eggs and canned meat and fruit and stuff. So actually I got in real good shape. Now this kid I helped load is Malcolm McClarty of the 7th Material. He lives in Temple, Texas. We got to be real buddies because we were on the truck together. In my squadron, I was there, a Casey, a Poovey, and a Phipps was there. The only one still alive is Phipps and I. The other 2 are dead. But that was the only ones out of the 34th. The others was made up of people from other organizations, so I don't know who they were. Well, anyway, we go back to O'Donnell, and they send us up to Tarlac. And we get on a detail that's in a schoolhouse. And we sleep in the halls of the schoolhouse. There's about 600 men on this detail. And the Japanese cook and feed us. And we get pretty good ration of rice and soup. And we're going out in what was a camp, a military camp, and we're tearing down these Swallownipi huts and salvaging the lumber. And old Malcolm and I get a real rough job. I mean, a rough job. We get 2 rocks and a can, and we got to straighten bit nails and put in the can. That's our job. Well, we had a real funny thing happen there. How much time you got?
Much time as you got.
Well, I wrote this up, and it finally got printed in one of the magazines. They're going to have a celebration celebrating the fall of Corregidor. Now this is along about last part of May. Yeah, last part of May. And they've got all these Filipino young men over here in this. Now this schoolhouse we're in, it's got a big stadium and a racetrack and all that. They're going to have a field day. So they got all these Filipino young men over there. There must be 300 or 400 of them, and they got the girls in the school and all. And they're having this track meet. And when the track meet's over, they're going to have a parade in downtown Tarlac. So we don't go to work that day. This is a celebration. See, it's celebrating the fall of Corregidor. And we're in behind this chain link fence. Well, here they come. We know the track meet's going on. We can kind of see it. It's over about 2 blocks over, but you can see it. So the parade starts. And here comes this Japanese officer on a white horse, and he's got on his keepee and his brown boots and spurs and his long sword, you know. And he's leading it, and right behind him is a military band, Filipino military band. And in behind these are all these boys carrying these sticks for rifles, and then behind these the girls and the young people in the track meet. Well, when they get up close to us, they're passing right in front of the schoolyard, and we're all lined up on this chain link fence watching it. When they get up there, why, this band starts beating the Stars and Stripes Forever, and we just go nuts. And that doggone officer, he's bowing and smiling. He thinks we're cheering him. and I remember they had this bass drum, you know. He was on a little two-wheel cart, and the guy was pulling it, and the little old boy beating that drum was about not even more than 3.5 feet. And he was grinning and just beating that drum to the Stars and Stripes Forever. Well, next day we go to work and back to the nails. And then all of a sudden, Mac and I get pulled out, and these other guys that was on this truck detail, we get pulled out, and we get sent back on, this is the 3rd of June, we get sent back to O'Donnell. And when we come in, of course, everybody runs down to see who's coming in, you know, and mostly doctors and chaplains and corpsmen. And we find out that the day before and the day before that, they had taken all the people out of O'Donnell and walked them down to campus and put them on a train and took them to Cabanatuan. Or they took them, they're not sure where they went. But what we got here is a lot of people that can't walk, but they're not really so sick that they're terminal. And what's happening, we don't know why. I don't know why anyway. And everybody wants some food. They want something. Well, I happen to have a couple of boiled eggs, and I thought, well, that's nice. I'll give this chaplain one. Boy, that sugar grabbed that egg and ran, and not even say thank you, boy. I tell you, he was probably pretty hungry, but that you didn't even say thank you or go to hell or anything. I thought, boy. But anyway, they got us up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we got 2 or 3 little old rice cookies. And so help me, here come our 15 trucks that we work for, and then finally dawns on us why. They're going to put these people on these trucks that can't walk, and we're the truck men that worked on this truck. So we go and get on two by two. We go and get on a truck, and we help load these sick people on that truck. And we don't know where we're going, but anyway, off we go, and we drive for several hours. In the afternoon, we come in into Cabanatuan, and they park these trucks along the road, and we sit there and sit there and sit there, and one man dies on the truck. And finally, they put us off, and the camp runs like this, and we can see these people out here in the camp, all through the camp, and the big deal was about 100 of them lined up at a faucet trying to get water. But they got a fence right across this row. There's one row of buildings here, and they got a fence, and they put all these sick people in there. And we go with them. And we understand we're quarantined. Can't come out. Well, Mac, I tell Mac, we got to do something. We're going to die of thirst here. Well, there's one mess hall there. And I go over to see the sergeant that's running that mess hall, and I says, hey, you want somebody to carry water? And he says, I sure do. So we get a 5-gallon can and a long pole and a piece of wire and make a bucket out of it, and we go through the gate. And the Japanese guard lets us go through the gate, and we go down here to this faucet, and the American officer makes them back up, and we put our 5-gallon can in there, get it full, and we go back up and dump it in the rice pot, and we go back and get another one. In the meantime, we fill our canteens up. Okay, he cooks rice, and he's got rice and some kind of whistleweed. Hardly anybody wants to eat. They're too sick. So we get plenty of rice, plenty of water, and I don't know, I don't know how long we were quarantined, but we finally get put down in the big camp. And we don't do anything now, you don't do anything in the big camp for several months, except go out on work details. Go out and get firewood, or go into town and help move some supplies. Otherwise, you just stay in the camp. That's just about it for months. Until one of the Arkansas lieutenants asked the Japanese if he can start a garden outside the main gate, and they let him, and they see that gives them an idea, so they turn the whole rice paddies around there for miles into a farm, and we all have to work on the farm. And it gets to be where they turn out everybody, even turn out the sick people to work on the farm. It gets to be a real chore. And they turn the officers out to work on the farm. And that's what I was doing when I got selected in a 300-man group. They had some big details early. The one that went to Davao, and they had a muckling detail that went out, and they had some work details that went into Manila. Then they didn't have anybody out for a long time. And then all of a sudden they picked 300 or 400, and the rumor is they're going to Japan. And then the next detail I'm in. And we have to have a stool exam, and we get smallpox. And the way they do it, they don't give you one little X and rub, they make 4 X's in a square and rub the serum in. All 4 of mine took. But that's the smallpox vaccination. And anyway, we get on there. They give us a jacket from Java, a denim-like jacket and trousers, but it's real thin, shoddy stuff, and a pith helmet. And so one of the guys had gone out on early detail, and he gave me a white pitcher like they serve lemonade on at a Boy Scout camp, you know, big white, or in a hospital. And I carry that. I've got that pitcher. They don't take it away from me. And we get on a train, and it's an open-air train. You know, there's no side, just a roof and seats. And we go back to Manila. And I get to walk from where they let us off the train down to Pier 7. And that's where we loaded coming in, was Pier 7, by the Manila Hotel. But Manila's in ruins, just ruins. But anyway, we go down, and they put us on a little old, small Japanese transport. 150 in the front hold, 150. Big old 6'3", well-built Japanese officer speaking perfect English put us on there. And told us to, you know, get in there and get back in there and get all spread out. And this ship takes out, and we're in there until we get out of Manila Harbor, and then they let us come up on deck.
What's the name of the ship, you know?
I've got it. The boy that's writing the book told me. We called it the Rockin' Maru, because on this trip, every time I went to get some food, that darn thing would rock. Now we were in Formosa in the harbor, anchored, and it come to get food, and as soon as they got the food out, that thing started rocking. And in that China Sea, that bugger would put the bridge wing, you know, the flying bridge, it would put it in the water. It would, no ballast, it didn't mount to anything. But they let us out all at daytime. We could come out on deck, and when we started, there was a cow laying right in front of the ridge, slaughtered. And every day they'd come cut some of that meat and put it back in the cook shack and cook it. And that cow just went on down, but it never got so bad that made it. We ate it, but we
What
got.
ship was you talking about that?
The Oreo Maru.
Well, no, that's Orioco
Orioco.
Maru. The Orioco Maru is one of the so-called hell ships. That's this on the back page there. That group of officers.
Yeah, right.
They put them on these ships. Now, the Orioco Maru was a passenger ship, and it was loaded with Japanese civilians. And they put these prisoners on there, and then they went around from Manila to Subic Bay, and they got bombed. Then they kept them in a tennis court there for a day or two, and then they put them on another train and took them up to Lingayen and put them on a boat. And I don't know where they got bombed there, but when they got into Formosa, I believe it was, the 2 ships got bombed. And they had to put the survivors on a 4th ship. It took 4 ships to get to Japan, and out of the 2,000 some, about 400 of them made it. And we had one boy in the 34th that made it all the way. He died here about 3 years ago.
Who was that?
Lorenzo Aguilar. He's the only one I know of who was on the Orioco Maru. There's still quite a few survivors around.
Yes.
Like I say, we had a pleasure cruise to Japan. We landed in Moji at night, and it was cold. It was October, and whatever it was I said, it was October 6th, and we like to froze to death. Been down in this hole at night, real warm, you know, coming out of the tropics. And then they held us there, and on the deck, and then they took us ashore and made us squat down on the beach, and we sat there for a couple, 3 hours, like to froze. Then they got us going through the streets of Moji, and the kids and the people threw rocks at us. They were in the alleys, you know, on the streets, and they threw rocks at us at night. And then they put us on a real first-class coach. Gave us a little lunch box made out of slabs of wood, you know, and wrapped in a piece of thin paper made out of shingle wood. And it had little rice and some raw fish and chopsticks. And this was our bento. This was our lunch on the train. And they pulled the shades down till we got out of town, and the shades went up across country. And we rode all night and all day. But then when we get out of there, we put the curtain up, and we finally got to somewhere near Osaka. And, well, actually, it was Hirahata. It wasn't in Hirahata, it was the big city near Hirahata. And it had to be Hirahata because we walked. And we all got off, and a Japanese officer we was all in big line. A Japanese officer said to count off, bongo. And the first dummies, the first 3 or 4 guys started counting in Japanese. Ichi, ni, san, si, and then it broke down. Because the rest of us didn't know it. No, there was a little harangue about that. And some of us said, look at those crazy guys. He says, those are war veterans, shell-shock war veterans from the China campaign. We had a lot of 4th Marines with us. And they recognized these civilian guards we had. He said, oh God, we're going to be guarded by civilians, and they're those shell-shocked troops out to China. He said, we're going to have a rough time. We didn't know where we was going. But anyway, we finally counted off in English and got on our road, and they took us into this little town of Hirohata, and we marched through a gate, and it had 8, 9-foot board walls all the way around, and inside was these 2 big barn-like buildings, and they were barracks. We didn't sleep on the 2nd floor. They had these barracks, so there was a platform. The building was built into 4 quarters, and there was a platform here in each one of these, and it was divided into little spaces, and then it went up above, and there was another sleeping platform right above it. And I guess we must have had about 150, 200 men in one building, and I got in the back building. There were 8 squads in the camp, and 5, 6, 7, and 8 were in the back building, and I got in squad 8, the last squad. When they bathed you by numbers, and we had to wait 8 weeks to get a bath, for the other 7 squads come first. This is in the wintertime. In the summertime, you just use the faucet out in back. They had like wash racks out in back, wooden platforms with faucets that come up. You wash your teeth and shave there. They gave us cigarettes once in a while, and razor blades and toothpaste. And we got old cast-off Japanese Army uniforms to wear. Summer, then when it got winter, we got winter, and they gave us one good, second-hand, padded Army uniform for winter wear, but they wouldn't let us wear it. We could only wear it on the day off. Well, that happened about once every 3 months, and then we couldn't wear it because they're going to make us work. Take our blankets to the river or do something like that. But what we were at the Seitetsu steel mill. And we had to walk down the road about, I don't know, 3 miles, maybe 4 miles, I don't know. But anyway, we fall out in the morning, and they'd take a party of about 200 down to the steel mill. About half of them went to the same job every day. They were special duty. The other half were coolies. And the steel mill is run by families. And we'd be hired out to one family or another family. One family would be shoveling coal, another one would be unloading iron ore. And they'd want 10 men or 6 men or 5 men. Just like a labor outfit, the Kelly girls and that type. We were hired out every day as coolies to work. We loaded pig iron. The big job was shoveling coke out of the coke cars onto the belt that took it up into the steel mill. And the hard job was loading iron ore because it was heavy. The dirty job was unloading coal out of the ships.
Besides the Japanese throwing rocks at you, what was the reaction of the Japanese civilians to you?
You know, I figured that we were feeding there in Hirohata, we were feeding about as good as the Japanese were. They weren't feeding too good. And we went to work in the steel mill. The first job I can remember, I got in a group that was underneath the belts, that carry this stuff up, and we were shoveling the debris that falls down. And there was a Marine, 4th Marine behind me, and he was talking to somebody behind him and shoveling around there. And they were talking about places they'd been and food and restaurants and all. And they come out of Shanghai, I think, where they came from before they came to the Philippines. And when we got a break, I looked around, and this Marine was talking to a Japanese civilian. He was working with us. And he was American Japanese. They'd come there to see his mother and got caught. I never got any hostility from any of the Japanese civilians. Now, the ones that guarded us were bad. Some of them were pretty mean because they were kind of shell-shocked. And the old interpreter we had was a mean booger. He couldn't interpret very well, but he said he was a Christian man and all that, but he was a mean booger. But the first camp commander we had, he'd get drunk on weekends and make us go to the river and wash our blankets, and then when we went back, he'd make us run past him in a gauntlet and slap us with his belt, but he wasn't bad. But later on, we got one they called a bull that was a mean booger. He'd beat people up for no reason at all. But I managed to avoid all that.
Was there enough food? Were you
No,
hungry?
no. In the morning, we would get a mess kit about a fourth full of rice soup. This is rice and water. And we get a cup of hot water for tea, but it was hot water. And then to work with, we had a little plastic bowl, like a coffee cup, but it was just a plastic bowl. You'd get that full of rice, and it was a small bowl now. You know the ones that go like this? You'd get that full of cold rice and a pickled radish. That was lunch. Now, if you didn't get the rice, you got the equivalent of a hot dog bun. Just plain bread. Just bread and flour. Flour and water is all it was, and baked, and a radish. Now, in the evening, you got the cup of rice, and you get a heavier, thicker soup. And sometimes, eventually, they put soybeans in it, and once in a while, there was a little whale meat, and sometimes a little horse meat, but not much. And one old camp commander who was stealing our rice, he was stealing it by trading. He would trade barley. He traded several sacks of barley for several sacks of rice. And we loved the barley, so that was great. And then they got 4 or 5 barrels of pickled silkworms. This is silkworms that have been fried in a soy sauce oil and put up in barrels. And we heard that they were on ration to pregnant women in Japan. But he had got a hold of several barrels of this, stole them somewhere, I guess, and traded them for rye. And they put this in the soup. Well, when we get a mess kit with that, everybody would try to count how many silkworms they had, and also when you had soybeans, you was always trying to figure out how many soybeans, because it wasn't a whole lot. Now my weight just kept going down, but there was a detail there that some of us got onto that was easy. They pull the slag out. When they run a steel mill, the molten stuff comes out of the big furnace, and it runs down a ditch, and it goes into a square hole. The heavy metal goes to the bottom and runs out over here and goes into a big iron pot on a railroad car. And over here's another ditch higher up that gets the molten rock, and it goes into an iron car. This iron will go and be put into bars and sheets, but this stuff goes back out and it's dumped, and it cools off, and we break it up, and we get a duck bucket, like a lower half of a duck's bill, and a rake, and break this up and scrape it in the bucket, walk up a gangplank, dump it in the gondola, and go back and get some more. And when we had a mountain as high as the boss wanted, we were through for the day. It's real. And in the wintertime, the slag's warm, and you kind of bake your rice if you had rice. But what you didn't know was that damn thing was eating the meat off of you. And if you stayed on that detail too long, you went down, and that's what I was doing when I went down to where I couldn't work.
Did you receive any Red Cross packages?
Not. Oh, yeah. In 1942, we got a Canadian Red Cross package. Had Canadian British stuff in it. And I think we got half. Then one more time there in Kamantalan, we got a package, I think, a whole package. And then in Japan, I think I got 1, maybe 2 food packages. Now my folks sent me 1 package, and I got a khaki shirt and trousers, and some vitamin B pills, and I don't know what else, but the games and stuff was taken out of it. I didn't get that. I'd sent a letter. I got to send 2 or 3 letters home. Mostly they were cards, and you just indicated whether you was well or sick or what. But I did get to write 2 letters. And in that I said, if you can, send all the vitamins you can. Well, they went and bought a package of B1 pills that were sugar-coated. It was a big, like a popcorn bag, you know. And when they come, the sugar broke an awful lot of them. But anyway, I thought, boy, this is great. I took about 3 pills in the morning, and I take 3 in the afternoon, and I did that for about a week, 10 days. And one evening, I just sat down and ate that whole sack full of sugar and vitamin B pills. I wanted to fill my stomach up one time, so I ate the whole shooting match. I held out for about a week, 10 days, and I couldn't hold out anymore. But food wasn't adequate, but it would keep you alive, and you could work. But now some guys fared pretty good, but they were able to steal food and get food one way or another.
There wasn't any kind of black market where you could purchase.
No, you couldn't buy anything. We didn't have anything to buy with.
You wouldn't have any.
Wouldn't have any money, but they steal stuff off these ships. Now, civilian ships are no problem, but they stole off a military ship a time or two, and that got pretty. They made them confess who did it, and then they got beat up pretty good. In fact, they disappeared. Kempy Todd took them and never came back. But they were in cahoots with Japanese civilians to steal this stuff. And then the Japanese would give them things. But I never got any of that.
How long were you in Japan total?
Well, I went there October the 6th, 1943, and I left there about September the 4th, 45.
Did you know about the bomb?
Yeah. On the 24th of July, the B-29s burned this big city that was near Hirohata, and the guys climbed up in the rafters of the building. They could look out the window and they could see the B-29s and they could see the bombs falling, and they described it. And when we left, we went there in trucks to get on a train, and there was just miles and miles and miles of nothing but burnt sheet iron. That's all that was left of this big city. Now, this is on the 24th of 1945. When we were down in the mill, we had to run a couple times because the P-51s come in and straight the mill next to us. They never hit our mill. And I must have been on sick at this time when it happened. Whenever what? When did they bomb Hiroshima? August?
August 6, 1945.
Was that the Enola Gay that did that?
That's the Enola Gay.
August 6th. Okay, I don't know why, but I got up that morning to go out to the wash rack, and the sky, it was black. And you look up there, and up about 100, 200 feet was this black cloud, real swirly. And you look over here, and you can see a little blue, and you look over here, and a little blue. But right over us was this black cloud, and it went on all day, and it went on all night, and it went on the next day, and the next day. But it seemed to get a little higher, and the blue got a little more, and it seemed to thin a little bit. Well, somebody said that the Japanese said that there'd been a big bomb. So we were under the fallout of Hiroshima for about 3 days. Because that's what it was. That was the smoke from the burning. But we never did get any details on it until after the war was over.
What was the Japanese reaction to you when Japan surrendered?
Well, August the 15th now, we were all saddled up, and we'd had our breakfast. Now, you want to know how they fed us? Mm-hmm. They had a mess hall and a mess sergeant in there with 3 or 4 Americans. They had these big pots, and he would cook whatever ration they gave him. And then we were in this building, and there's 4 squads of us in here, and we were sitting in between these aisles were these tables with the built-in benches, and these men they'd fill these aisles up with men when you were eating. Well, each group of 2 tables would send a mess cook to the kitchen, and 2 of them. And one of them would get a bucket of rice, and the other would get a bucket of hot water or soup and bring it back. And then these guys would dish it out to the 20 men or whoever he had in his group. And if it didn't come out right, he'd have to go back and take a little bit out of everybody to make it come out just right. And about the 2nd year, some of the guys come to me and said, "Hey, that mess cook's stealing." They says, "He and that other guy, when they get through, they got a lot in there, and they're taking it up there and they're eating it." So they said, "Why don't you go do something about it?" So I, being a staff sergeant, they picked on me. So I went to the mess sergeant, and he said, "Okay, Gage, you're the new mess cook." So Pappy and I, we did it, and we did it for quite a while. And I think I was still doing it when the war ended. But that's the way you ration the stuff out. And at 20 men there watching like a hawk, and you better do it just right. But everything was rationed out, and that's the way they do it in the Navy.
What kind of food did you have? What kind of food did you have?
Well, we had the rice, soup in the morning, and steamed rice cold at noon at night. And in the little thicker soup in the evening, it would have maybe a little squash in it, or whistleweed, which is some kind of vine, I don't know what it was. And like I say, once in a while there'd be a little meat, whale meat or horse meat or something. But and soybeans, lots of soybeans in the evening soup. But you were asking, what was your original question? Forget now. I'll tell you about what was it? Oh,
what type of food did you
okay. You want to know when the war ended? I think it was going to say August the 15th. You know what happened? We had our morning rice, and we was waiting for them to holler all out on the road, and we had our whatever noon. And old Lee Garner, the mess cook, come back in and says, "Now hear this, all hands, turn your rice back into the kitchen. You're not going to work today." Well, boom! Boy, everybody started hollering and yelling and rumors and hey, I bet the war's over, you know, and because there'd been some rumors, you know, that thing, and we'd seen these P-51s strafing the mill, so we didn't do anything. We sat around the camp all day. I mean, that was it. And then a couple of American officers showed up from somewhere, from another camp. We had a doctor. All American officer had was a doctor. And then the old commander had a hog across the road there, and he'd been taking a lot of our rice and feeding it to the hog to fatten it up. So about the second day, old Lee and some couple other guys got real bold and went over there and got that hog and slaughtered it. And they cooked it. And then they broke in the storeroom, and we get all the rice we wanted. I mean, but now the Japanese guards are still outside. The military guard was outside. We got a military guard outside all the time, and the civilians are on the inside. So we're getting more rice and soybeans. There's plenty of that, and there's a few of the civilians around. Most of them disappeared. I don't remember when we finally got out of the camp, but somewhere along in there, it got to where we could go out. But anyway, word come that we were going to get a food drop from an airplane, and we're supposed to put PW on the roof. And they tried to get the Japanese to give us some orange paint. Well, they gave us a couple of barrels of curry powder. Well, they did. It made PW up there, but it rained that night and washed it all off. So they did it again, or else they finally forced them into getting some real paint. I don't remember. But anyway, the captain got all the men out in the square and said, now here's what we're going to do. He says, well, they're going to drop this stuff, and we're all going to stay in the camp. We're not going to run out, but we got a detail of about 20 men here, and they're going to go up to the gate, and the sergeant here will ask the guard for permission to go out and go after that stuff, and then they'll go get it and bring it in, and we'll stay in here. Okay. That day that plane come in, it come up over here. We're down in a valley, these steel mills, and on the edge of the inland sea there. This B-29 comes floating in here, and that's the biggest airplane I ever saw. It looked like it filled the whole valley. It's low. And he goes down, and he goes by. And he goes way on down, see? And all of a sudden, hey, he's turning. And he starts back, and some Bombays are open. You know, you can see him coming open. And we figured he was going to come right up there and drop it. Well, about a mile and a half from us, here comes the first pop out. And it hits a high power voltage line, and there's blue sparks going everywhere. Then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And he's dropping them a mile away from us, coming right at us, and they're all getting in these high power lines. And he keeps dropping, and the last load hits right across behind the hog pen there in a rice paddy, you know, and the old slop just goes like this. You think a guy went up and knocked on the door? Shucks, no, 300 men hit that gate just like that. And I went by and I looked at that old guard there, that rifle, and that little boy, he didn't know, should I shoot him or run? He was talking to himself, and he was scared. Because it's right, you know, just whoom. And everybody spread out, and I went right straight across, and I waited up about between my knees and the hip, and floating around on all this slime is gallon cans of peaches and heavy syrup broken open, and those yellow peach heads are just floating around in that slime. Well, there were some cans that didn't break, and we salvaged that, and they got there's some Koreans there. They're practically prisoners of war too. They worked in the mill. They got some of them to go out and get some of this stuff and bring it in. And we got quite a bit of it, but the Koreans got about 75% of it, and we got about 25%. Well, it cheers, morale goes real up, because we didn't get a whole lot out of it, but we did get something, you know, but then we hear that we're going to get another one. In about 3 days, we'll get, some way or other, they got word we're going to get another one of those. Well, they got all these parachutes in, and some old boy got the idea, and they cut them in 4-foot strips. And the day that we were supposed to get this food drop, they went out on their yard, in the street in front, and they took those strips and they wrote Y-A-N-K-S. Here come 3 B-29s, coming in one right after the other, and they pass over us, and I guess they see that Yanks down there, and we hear later, I got a note from a guy in Oklahoma City, they each had 3 loads, and they were hitting 9 camps in that valley that day. They come around us, they dropped all 9 loads on the Yanks. So we got about half of it, maybe, or a third. Anyway, we got a lot of it in. They had 2 50-gallon drums welded bottom to bottom with the bottom out, and they had quarters of beef in them, or sacks of sugar. And when they kicked out, they broke the parachutes, and they just come down in those rice paddies and went down about 15, 20 feet, you know, in those rice paddies. But we got enough stuff that when we left here up Otta by train, we took 2 or 3 boxcar loads of stuff with us. I remember one deal, this one sack comes down and it's a mattress cover and it's swinging and it comes down and right into the camp and right on the end was a shoe shop where they repaired our shoes. And this sack hits on that, parachute hits on the roof and that sack swings in, goes through the shoe shop door and drops. It's full of shoes. Another boy was standing on the porch there and I was standing right beside him and he was getting ready to step out and I don't know what happened, but I kind of grabbed hold of him because I thought I heard something and those racks, one of those racks had fallen free and it just missed the porch. If he had stepped out, it would have clobbered him. And I heard that in some of the drops, some people did get killed with this type of thing.
You having trouble with men overeating when this food drops?
Not here. Back in Cabatatawan, on that first food box, some guy ate the whole box and died. We got our first food box. No, I don't think we had. We only lost about, I think we maybe lost a dozen men died in the camp mostly from pneumonia.
Did the attitude of the Japanese guards change from the end of the war?
Not really. Not really. I don't think they did. They all disappeared there right at the end. They didn't want to get any retaliation. But 3 or 4 of those guys in that tank company were from Chicago, and they went down and stopped one of those trains, those high-speed passenger trains. They stopped it, and they Jesse James that train. They robbed it. And the Kimpitai and the local police come into the camp and says, you can keep all the military, the swords, and anything you took from military, but you've got to give the civilian pocketbooks and stuff back, or there's going to be big trouble here. So they gave all the civilian stuff back. And this same gang went and got that bull, the one I was telling you about, and they I don't know what they did to him. I think they tied him out on an anthill on a hill somewhere. The one that had been so bad, they found him. They were that Chicago bunch in that tank outfit, they were some hombres. They were the ones making deals, with the Japanese stealing stuff. They managed.
Do you have any bitters toward the Japanese?
Yeah. I'm driving my 4th Honda. I've got that Sony over there, and I know. No, the bitterness was those people that was in the military at the time the war was on, and the people running it, and they're all long gone. No, the Japanese, we worked in the mill with a lot of them, and in fact, they're out of Tarlac. I had to go back to Clark Field on a truck, and there was 4 or 5 of us in there, and the old driver ran into a carabao, and the guard, one of that guys rammed his head in the cab and it knocked him out, so the guard picked me to stay with him, and they put us in the Crossroads Village, and we stayed there all that day till the trucks came back, and those villagers gave us everything. And then they come up on, we're giving you mangoes and candy and stuff, and you don't eat it. Well, we couldn't eat all of it, so we tried to explain to them we were going to take it back, people in the camp. But on similar detail, I went to Clark Field to unload a bunch of empty oil drums. And little Japanese noticed my shirt I had an old dirty shirt I wore. I had a good one, but I had this dirty one I wore, and he knows that it was split. And he took his shirt off and going to give it to me, and the other soldiers told him, no, you can't do that, you get in trouble. But he's going to give me a shirt. Because I was getting sunburns. I was getting sunburned with that tear on there. And that truck outfit, they treated us great when we worked for there. But those 2 sergeants thought we were the dumbest military people they ever saw. We couldn't line up or count or do anything right, They didn't think we come anywhere near being military at all. You couldn't count in Japanese, and
I've
couldn't
heard
understand them.
This Earl Pratt tells about the same stories. He was on the Death March.
Who's this?
Earl Pratt. He lives in Woodward.
Okay.
And
I don't know him, but
he says that he didn't see all the mistreatment on the march at all.
yeah, most of them won't. Most of them will go along with what they've read and heard and embellish it a little bit. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
Because I've had guys that was on that same thing with me, and when the guns fired on the Cabin Airfield, and there were dead bodies on the road and everywhere and everybody. I didn't see any of that. Now some Japanese got killed around that gun. When it hit that gun, it killed some Japanese gunners. But like I say, on that march, I saw 1 dead civilian, some bodies in the lagoon, 2 dead mules, and that's it. And we only lost 2 men. And we don't know what. We know Beck was going blind. And Actus was probably died of starvation. He was such a big guy, he never could get enough to eat.
Do you have any more questions?
I can't think of anything.
We got down to, we went to Yokohama by train to come home, and they unloaded us on the dock there, and I was in charge of the group in my car or whatever. I had to take them down to a ship, and I saw the commanding officer there, and like I told you, I got him to sign this certificate. But we got into about a 4-man, a six-ship convoy going back to the Philippines, and I don't think it's the first day, I think it was the next day out, the darn Commodore ordered a gun practice. Now I'm down in one of these ships way up in the, about 2 decks down, way up in the bow, watching a movie, and you come back under the bridge and you climb up in this pack, ladder inside a big pack, and when you get to a deck, there's a slot and you crawl out, and you go up the next and you crawl out. Well, I had decided I didn't want to watch that movie. I was getting claustrophobia up in that little tight hole up there. And I was on this ladder, and I was just about to get on the deck I wanted to get out on, and the war broke out. And that concussion shoved me back down, and I thought, what in the devil's going on here? The war's supposed to be over. Well, I climbed out and looked, and what they was doing, the 5-inch rifles was shooting, and the powder would make a smoke ring. Then all those pom-poms were shooting at that smoke ring for target practice. And then there was 4 or 5 ships doing this. They had more firepower than we had in the whole Philippines. In that little group of ships, they had more firepower than all of us had, except Corregidor.
What did you do when you first got back to the States? First thing you did?
Okay. I come in, we went back to Manila on this ship, and they took us over to Cavite, the old Navy dock, and they had a replacement depot there called the 29th. That's where they were bringing all the American POWs, and they were processing them. And I got a superficial examination, and they noted what I said was wrong with me, which wasn't very much. And there's a Red Cross outfit there and a big mess hall, and you got all you wanted to eat. And that's when I found a lot of guys and noted that they were back to PI. And I don't know. I do know that Camel and Reynolds said they were going to go back to Bataan, and they did. And they came back and they said they couldn't find anything. It was all grown up, and the Japanese had tore everything up, couldn't find anything. Now Reynolds later told me they went back there to find some records. So I think he went back there to look for money that was buried. But anyway, they told me to get on a boat there after about a week, 10 days. I had enough points to come home, and I got on a troop transport that had a bunch of American POWs. It had about 50, 75 British POWs from some British place, and a lot of guys going home on points. And in order to eat, you had a little pasteboard card that had numbers all the way around, and every time you went through a meal, they punch it out. I remember now, I was about 98 pounds when the war ended. Now, we had about, from August 15th to about September 4th or 5th, more food. We had Navy chow going back to Manila. We had about a week, 10 days of food there at 29. And then I come home 18, 20 days on this transport. And we got so many seasick people, I got about 4 meal cards. I could have had a dozen. And I go through the meal line, and I go back through the meal line, and I go back through the meal line again, and I get ice cream and milk and whatever. And go to Letterman. He unloaded me at Letterman, and I'm been there about an hour or two, and here comes my sister's best girlfriend and her husband. They had moved to San Francisco, and he worked at shipyards, and Ruth had told them I was coming in, and they come look at me. So they took me home, and I spent that afternoon and evening with them and supper, and they took me back to the hospital. And the hospital wanted to know what was wrong with me, and the only thing I think of, during the invasion, when the Japanese tried to reinforce their landing, the 88th Artillery brought 2 half-tracks down on the beach, and Philippine scouts, and the first sergeant was up here on telephone, and I had to run about 100, 200 feet from telephone over here and tell this lieutenant to lower his guns or raise them left or right. And his telephone went out on Agaloma Point, where the lieutenant was from West Point was directing firepower. Well, I ran over there about two or three times, and they fired those 75s. I didn't have sense enough to put my fingers in my ears. And after about 3 rounds, the lieutenant says, "Sergeant," he says, "forget it." He says, "I can see the barges out there. There's tracers sticking on the sides of them, and I'm bore sighting these 2 pieces." I mean, he could just lay his barrels down flat and fire right at them. But anyway, my high frequency sound is gone. I hear crickets and chickadees all the time in my, locusts in my ears. I've had them examined, and they say there's nothing they can do. It's just like high frequency. I can't hear it too good. But anyway, I told them I had ear problems. So they sent me to Chickasha, Oklahoma, to Borden General Hospital. There was a big Army hospital there. Also, the Women's College was there. And on the way out of Letterman General, they put 7 of us in a hospital car. And these hospital cars, you know, had these bunks, 3, and big wide windows, you know, and the 3 bunks, and about, I don't know, about 9, 10, 12 of them on one side, and the same number. We had 2 nurses and 3 corpsmen, and 7 of us POWs. And we come along, and we get to El Paso. And of course, these nurses are trying to sell us back rubs and anything, you know. Generally nobody wants anything. I wasn't interested in anything. I just laying there and looking out that window and going home. And we get to El Paso, and 6 of those guys disappear, man. Those were going to be in the switchyard for about 2 hours, or 3 hours, I don't remember. Those guys got their clothes on and left. And those 2 little nurses, 2nd lieutenant nurses, they see the court martial. Lost your prison, lost your charges. I said, "No, don't worry, they'll be back." They went to get something to drink. And sure enough, in about 2 hours, here they come, all as happy as larks, carrying a bottle. They'd all gone somewhere and found a bar. And now, I never drank or smoked, so I didn't have the heebie-jeebies over smokes, and drinking was never a problem. But anyway, we go to Borden, and they give me a real thorough examination, and they let me come home for a week. My folks come to get me in the car, my dad and my mother, and they, oh, you got that thing right now, better not get up.
Here, I can shut
Stop it a minute, will you?
Okay.
Almost. Anyway, they ran me through the mill over there, and they say there's not anything wrong with me whatsoever. They marked me back to duty. So they send me up to Camp Chaffee, and I get up there, and I already heard that we're entitled to 6 months at home, detached service, full pay. And I'm tech sergeant. I'm drawing tech sergeant pay now. So I get up to Camp Chaffee, and they run us in there, and I kind of wonder what's going on. I got a bunch of civilians typing up stuff and handling, and I says, what are you doing? He said, "We're going to discharge you, Sergeant." I says, "No, I don't think so. Let me see that order." And he handed it to me, and that's what it said. I said, "I'll see you later." So I went back through Chaffee, and I finally found an Air Corps office, and I told the colonel that they're trying to discharge me, and I didn't want to be discharged. He says, "Sergeant, we'll fix it." Boy, he had old boy sit down right out there and said, "I'm going home." So the hospital had made a boo-boo. Now most guys got discharged right off the bat, see?
Yeah.
They come home and got discharged. Many of them didn't get a physical. They might have got one at the depot, they may not have. If they didn't go to the depot, a lot of them never did really get any record of what was wrong with them. But anyway, I went home for 6 months, got married in January, and we went to Miami for 18 days for rest and recreation, and I was entitled to take 2 people, so we'd just been married, so we figured, well, we'd have a nice honeymoon, so I took my mother. She had a great time.
Whenever you were released in Japan, when did you first see the Americans?
Oh, the first Americans we saw were the Hellcats that come off the carriers. They come in and they'd come down and they'd try to put their flaps and their wheels down, and they'd come down inside our fence, and then they'd pull out and they'd try to throw magazines and stuff out of the back cockpit. Then some American officers showed up from some other camps, and then somewhere along in there, a woman reporter showed up. And 2 of these Marines off of Guam got her over in the corner with the chains and the clubs, and they were feeding her the biggest line of bull you ever saw, and she was just writing it down. I don't know whether she ever published it or not, but I thought, boy, they're sure pulling her leg. But now how she got there, I don't know. The first Americans that we really saw was there at Yokohama, the people that told us what ship to get on. They were Navy, and big guys. You know, they all looked like they weighed 300 pounds and 6'6", and they really weren't, but that's what they looked. And compared to the way we looked, they were tremendously big, you know, well fed. But then the crews on the ships, of course, the Navy crews.
Yep. Well, we have 3 hours.
Yeah,
I tell you, it goes on and on and on. There's a lot of things I haven't touched, a lot of funny things, and
Anything in particular that?
well, there when we were working on those ships, we had one little old Marine there. And see, when we went to Hirohata, there was already a group of people there, and they were Marines off of Guam, and they worked on the docks in Yokohama. But they had a bunch of them that were bad. They couldn't get them to, they'd steal, and they couldn't control them, or for one reason or another. And they sent them to Hirohata. They called them the 88 balls. Well, they'd been there for months before we got there, and they knew all the ropes and everything, and they took us to real cleaning on lots of ways. But one of them was a little old fella, and I don't know how he got in, he was so short. But he'd been down in one of these ships, and he trying to steal something off the galley, and the cook was after him with a cleaver, and he was going around and hollering, "Somebody take him off me! Take him off me! Take him off me!" He finally got out of the hole, and when you get out of the hole, they can't tell one from another. In the same bunch, they stole a quarter of beef, and they broke it up a little bit, and they was trying to figure out how to take it in. And the cook found out it was gone, and the captain, and they hadn't broke it up. They had it hidden down there, and they were trying to figure out how they were going to get it in. And they had quite a problem getting that thing back in the galley. So they got it back in there, and when they complained to the captain, you know, he said, "Well, I want to see it." He opened it up, and there it was. It was a little dirty, but it was there. But they had to get soy sauce water and doctor it down and sell it to us at outrageous prices. I had a very near escape from getting killed. One of the ships come in had lots of peanuts on it up in the front hole and the coal in the back, and the guys working the ship would keep saying they had to go out the toilet, you know, had to go over sides, and they'd get permission. Well, on the way back they'd try to get up in that hole and get some of those peanuts, and they were taking them out, and they had these cranes, you know, and the operators up in these cranes unloading this stuff. And these guys would go and bury these sacks. They'd put these peanuts in a sack or something, and they'd go bury them in a coal pile, and then go back and the crane operator would come down and get them. Well, they had spilled a lot of them, and there was these 220 wires, 3 of them running in this underground tunnel, and it had wire grating over it. And I could get down in there and I could get down in there and crawl and get those. But I reached up one time and touched those wires, and I thought I was going to get fried. Luckily, I didn't. But anything to eat, you do anything.
Yeah. Anything else?
Can't think of anything. I'd like to come back and look at your.
Okay.
Sometime if you'll let me. I'd love to just sit.
I got an awful lot of for instance here.
I'll come back and do that. I'd like to, just sit and look at it.
Now back, my daughter Xeroxed this thing. I don't know what shape it in. And it's possible you could Xerox her Xerox copy.
Yeah, I'd like to copy this if we could.
Well, that book's coming out one of these days, and he's trying to get the poop on 6 squadrons.
Do you think he's got a publisher? Or?
Here's MacArthur's Tunnel. Here's some of the 34th dead.
Is this in Manila?
Here's that envelope that made it.
Is this the Manila?
Yeah, it's Manila
National
Cemetery. Some more of them.
Does this mean that their bodies
They're
are
there.
actually
They're there. Nobody wanted to ask for them to come home.
You mean if there isn't a body?
It's on the names on the wall.
Oh, if there's
all
no
those
body,
pillars
the names
around
on the wall.
the cemetery, the names
I
on the wall.
see. So
You gonna read my letter? Son of a gun. Here's the enemy we had at Agaloma. That's something that got captured.
Yeah.
And here's Kappas. This is Kappas. And here's those stupid iron boxcars that they tried to send.
you know Philip Coon, don't you?
Yeah, I know Philip.
Okay.
He's 31st Infantry.
Try to-
This was the 34th before we went overseas. This was on that maneuvers that we got called back from. And this is how some of them look today. See, we've all changed.
Where's the reunion held every year?
Different places.
Different places?
This is my daughter. This is me and my daughter. And this is 34th man, Ed Betts and his wife. I don't know whether stamp collector would like to have an envelope like that or not. I have a feeling it might have a little value
Oh, yeah.
with that mark on it like
I
it is.
wouldn't let them get to it. Take it.
I don't know how it got into this mess of stuff. I usually kept it in a locked box.
Well, as I said, I would really like to come back and look through it.
I don't know when this picture was taken. I do know when this was. I come home on furlough along about Christmas time of 41. No, 40.
40.
No, 41. It had to be earlier, about October 41, because I couldn't come home in 40. I just got in.
Okay, thank you. Let me surrender day, September 2nd.
Well, we gathered up there in the court and stood in ranks. There are 8 ranks across there. I'm in the back rank, squad 8, and the little Japanese soldiers come in and pull their little old tiny flag down about this big, white with a red ball on it. Took it down and took it away, and we had one Britisher in the camp, so we had to make those are handmade flags. They made them out of parachute silk and stuff. And we made a Union Jack and an American flag and ran them up. Now, we didn't leave there for another 3 days.
Was there a celebration that day?
I just don't remember. I know we were going out. I traded my Japanese Yasame suit, my rest suit, off for a dozen eggs. And I'd gotten some bricks together in the back of there where I was going to build a fire and cook them. And I'd come back and some little boy stole my bricks, and we had a fight over it. I remember that. I got my bricks back. Cooked the eggs too. And then another guy and I took that white, what's that stuff that the parachute's made of? Not silk, but
Nylon.
Nylon. Took some of that over to a Korean woman, and she made us each a shirt. But lordy lord, they were Korean style. I couldn't wear them. Cut wavy and big sleeve. But anyway, she made us 2 nice shirts. I brought them home, but they're long gone. The Koreans up there, they were showing us all that stuff. It's got out of the airdrop. They had more than we had. They had it on the windowsills, and they just giving us the raspberries.